Здравствуйте, comrades. Welcome to Socialism Saturday, the first Socialism Saturday since the actual Socialism Conference. I hope we have some new attendees at Socialism Saturday tonight. Please let us know in the chat if this is your first Socialism Saturday. And if this is your first Socialism Saturday, get ready to be thrown right into the deep end of socialism. Because on Socialism Saturday, we watch real socialists, real ones. We do not watch AOC socialists. We do not watch Bernie Sanders socialists. We watch the real deal, the farthest of the far left. And we do this because I believe it is incumbent upon us to understand exactly who the real enemy is. Because the real enemy usually isn't the people that your influencers are telling you are the real enemy. Listen, there's this video going around of Glenn Beck like railing on Hillary Clinton for the 87,000th time. And I will say, I actually do have a lot of respect for Glenn Beck. I generally think of all the conservative influencers, Glenn Beck usually does like a fairly good job. But I saw this video today of Glenn Beck railing on Hillary Clinton for the 87,000th time and bemoaning the fact that nothing is ever going to happen to Hillary Clinton. And I'm just like, man, can you guys please focus? I understand, I truly do, that you guys hate Hillary Clinton. But believe me when I tell you, and I think we're going to see that tonight, that we have bigger problems to worry about, people. We really do. There are so many more important things that are really scary that are happening right in front of us right now. And my hope is that by showing you the real socialists, not the ones they talk about on Fox News, but the real ones, that we will start to get it together. Because here's the deal, guys. We have been watching Socialism Saturday for 7 months. Almost every single Saturday for 7 months. And sometimes we even do a midweek Socialism Saturday just for good measure, because it's fascinating when you get into it. And what we have learned from watching Socialism Saturday is that if we watch socialists from like 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago, back then they were saying things in the open that have now become the talking points of the Democratic Party today. All right. So the things that we hear from the real socialists from a couple of years ago are now the things that like Nancy Pelosi and AOC and all of these people are saying on CNN. Because it really is, they seem to think they're losing, but they're not, because the real socialists are actually driving the agenda for the far left. And when they tell you what they're doing, you need to start believing them, because they're putting it all out there. This is what's so amazing about this. They are quite literally putting all of their plans on the internet for years and years and years and years and years. And the problem is that no one on our team are watching them and listening to them and then believing them when they tell us what they're going to do. So that is why we watch Socialism Saturday. It is not about agreement with the socialists, because we do not agree with the socialists. Okay, maybe every once in a while we do actually get a socialist in our chat, and we provide an hospitable place. Like, you're allowed to be here. You don't have to agree with me on everything, contrary to the rumors spread on Twitter. And so every once in a while we do actually get real socialists in our chat, but as long as they're not rude and they don't insult people and they don't like cause a commotion, they're allowed to stay. But our purpose is not to change the minds of the socialists. Our purpose here is to understand the socialists. And just because I am throwing you all into the deep end, and again, welcome to everyone who this is your first Socialism Saturday, and a special welcome to Steven, who's in Hong Kong at like, what time is it in Hong Kong, Steven? Is it like 6 a.m.? He joins us from abroad. every week. Well, when he can, not every week, perhaps. But I'm throwing you guys right into the deep end. I am doing my most favorite dystopian topic under the umbrella of Socialism Saturday with our most favorite crazy socialist who works at an Ivy League university in Philadelphia. Her name is Sophie Lewis. And Sophie has done many, many talks and many, many videos about the concept of abolishing the biological family. And I happened to come across this talk that Sophie did with Veriso Books, who is one of her publishers. And this was like 6 months ago. So this is a relatively new presentation from Sophie, but we have watched Sophie multiple times on Socialism Saturday. And I promise you guys, Sophie never disappoints. She really doesn't. She never like something crazy is always going to come out of this woman's mouth. And she has lectured at Ivy League universities all over the place. She currently either volunteers or works with the University of Pennsylvania in one of their centers. She has published 2 books. Sophie has published this book called Full Surrogacy Now: Feminism Against Family. She's published this book called Abolish the Family, a manifesto for care and liberation. And Sophie's best friend, Emmy O'Brien, who Emmy O'Brien is also someone that we have watched on Socialism Saturday, has also come out with another family abolition book called Family Abolition, Capitalism, and the Communizing of Care. There we go. Communizing of Care. So this is real. This is not just something that's in a dark corner of the internet. I really want people to understand this. These people have lectured at Ivy League universities recently in the past couple of years. They're publishing books on the topic. You can see, there it is, Full Surrogacy Now. And this is something that I've covered more than most people on my Substack, where there was an article a couple months ago about how they were trying to figure out how to use brain dead bodies to gestate children in the bodies. This was in like a medical journal article. I covered it on my Substack. And so like one of the things I really want to impress upon people is they really do want to abolish the family. It's in the Communist Manifesto, folks. There's whole sections about abolishing the family. And then people like Sophie come and argue that we should be having all children through surrogacy. Now, can we think of some other places that we have seen the concept of all children being born via surrogates? How about Brave New World? How about Logan's Run? How about The Giver? How about even 1984? In 1984, they called it ArtSem. Remember, in 1984, they were working to abolish the orgasm, and they wanted to institute ArtSem, artificial insemination. And what that means when we go to a full surrogacy now environment is that the government is going to be allocating the children. Oh, The Handmaid's Tale. The Handmaid's Tale. Anyone? Bueller? The government is going to be allocating the children to the families that it approves of and blesses. And then communities of these elite families are going to be in charge of raising the children. This is real. It's not just in dystopian fiction. They are actually trying to do this. And so that's what we're watching tonight. This is possibly the most dystopian topic that we have found yet on Socialism Saturday. I mean, queer Marxism gets right up there. Queer Marxism is pretty crazy too, and queer Marxism actually works in conjunction with Abolish the Family, because what is the goal of queer Marxism? It's to eliminate gender. Queer Marxism seeks to create a world of theys. They want to eliminate the gender binary. They don't just want to get rid of women. A lot of times people make this mistake. They think it's about abolishing women. They think it's about abolishing lesbians. No. It's way worse than that. They want to get rid of all gender. They want to create a world of theys. And in doing so, they're going to end up sterilizing a large portion of the population when they put them on these on the puberty blockers and the cross-sex hormones. That's going to end up sterilizing a lot of people. And oh wait, what does a sterilized population need to reproduce? They need surrogates. Do you guys see how this all works together? I mean, I sometimes tell people I feel as though I have turned into a conspiracy theorist in the last couple years, but it's also one of those things where I have never been so sure that I'm right about something in my life, because all of these crazy ideologies that always exist under Marxism are just like they're complementing each other so beautifully that it's like, what other conclusions can we possibly draw? So that's what we're going to be watching tonight, folks. Congratulations, you made it on a good night. I do hope you enjoy it. Get some drinks. I've got a Pink Floyd beer that's a strawberry lemonade. I find that drinking or makes it a little bit easier to watch socialism. I mean, of course, I would never smoke weed on the internet. I would never do such a thing. But if you want to partake of that in your house, that's fine with me. I do try to drink red beer when we're watching socialism, just to get a theme going. So it's gonna be more of a pink beer, but I will have a drink. Let us know if you're drinking something in the chat. Now we do have a couple of orders of business before we get into it. And I'm going to go over the rules in a second. But before we get into that, I do just want to remind people that if you want to support the work I'm doing, the very best way to do that is by subscribing via my Substack. You can always join my Substack for free. My Substack is Carlyn, Karlyn, .substack.com. And you can subscribe for free. And of course, in the past week, I have been heavily talking about the socialist conference that I went to last week. I still have so much more to release about this conference. I still haven't even released my session notes yet. I haven't released a book list from the socialist booksellers yet. So there's still more coming on the socialist conference. I've just been kind of like putting it out there little bit by little bit, because I quite frankly don't want you guys to be overwhelmed, because it was a lot. But here's the deal. There is an even bigger socialist conference and an even more insane socialist conference that I want to go to in a couple of months. And I am going to be funding that based on the contributions that people make to my Substack. So if you guys appreciate the coverage I'm doing of this socialist stuff, which by the way, I'm pretty sure I'm the only person on the internet that's doing this right now. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure I'm the only one that's actually doing this type of thing where I'm going into these socialist groups and I'm showing you what they're saying. And I really, 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 really want to go to this conference in a couple months, but I'm going to need to make precautions because I've outed myself now. So I'm going to need to do all sorts of stuff in terms of making sure I can maintain my own safety while also getting you guys the information that you want about what's going on in these socialist groups. And there's a lot of ways you can support my work. You can become a member of my locals community, kb.locals.com, link in the description below. You can become a member of my Patreon, patreon.com/unwoke. Again, links below. You can make a one-time gift on activelyunwoke.com/support. But the very best way that I would like people to support me is by becoming a paying member of my main Substack, Carlyn, Karlyn.substack.com. And you can sign up for $5 a month or for $50 a year. And I have other Substacks too that you can fund. Leonard has generously already pledged on my cult Substack, which I do appreciate. And but I have a subscriber goal that I'm trying to hit, and you guys can help me out by that. And it's not a joke to say that I reinvest all of the money that I make from this stuff into doing more of this. Like I just did my taxes in the past week, and I kind of discovered when I did my taxes in the last week that this is really the only thing that I spend my money on. Well, that's not true. This and knitting and beer and food, and that's it. I have no life. This is what I do all the time. And so every dollar that you're giving to me will be reinvested back into doing this stuff. And I do send out a weekly newsletter on Sunday to all of the subscribers on my Substack that tells you, here's all the things I did in the last week so that you guys know what you're supporting with your subscription dollar. Now, if you sign up as a paid supporter, you're going to get a lot of perks, to include 2 Zoom calls with me every single week. They are private. They are unrecorded. They are on Monday evenings and Wednesday afternoons. And we get together together. We have a nice chat. I have the best community on the internet. We keep each other sane. And so that's one of the perks you're going to get. Another perk you're going to get is movie night. We do movie night on Sundays at 8 p.m. in my supporter Discord. And tomorrow we are wrapping up my month of narcissism because it's my birthday month. My birthday was on April 12th. And so that's my month of narcissism. And we're wrapping things up with The Wolf of Wall Street tomorrow at 8 p.m. in the supporter Discord. And when you sign up as a supporter on my Substack, you will receive an email tomorrow. It's going to look like this right here. It's going to be called the Unwoke Roundup. And at the bottom of this email is going to be your supporter perks. So your access to the Discord, your access to the Zooms, stuff like that. And that's how you take advantage of it. If you are a supporter on a different platform, like on Locals or on Patreon, or if you're a member of my YouTube channel, you will get access to your perks on the platform that you are supporting me on. And you can look for that to come out tomorrow. And I'm really looking forward to movie night. The Wolf of Wall Street is such a great narcissistic movie, and it's so good. And just everything about it is just like perfect. And so we're going to have a great time for movie night tomorrow. And I do hope that you guys will join us. Couple other things. Another way you can support my work is by going and checking out my merch store. I have lots of cool stuff in my merch store. I've got this great new section where I'm paying homage to the dear leader Mao, in honor of him ushering in the Cultural Revolution that the American socialists are emulating so amazingly. So this is my merch store. I've got all sorts of great stuff. I've got stickers. You can even buy stuff with me on it if you want some cult merchandise. But I've got some great stuff. Like including, I've got Pork Fest t-shirts coming up. I've got this amazing t-shirt called There Goes Our Hero, which is a dragon burning down Washington, D.C. We've got Unwoke merchandise, but one of the things you can buy in my merch store, which is unwokeart.com, is the official Socialism Saturday t-shirt. And of course, all merch sales do go to support the work I'm doing. I do all the designs myself. I use AI art to do it, and then I do some modifications and like graphic editing software, stuff like that. And I have a great time with it, and I think that I've come up with some really cool designs, and you guys can check them out at unwokeart.com and pick up some stuff, whether it's hoodies or t-shirts or stickers or prints. If there's something you want, let me know. I'll put it on that too, maybe if I like it. And so that also helps to support the work I'm doing, and I greatly appreciate it. Last thing is we do have Socialism Bingo. So if you want to follow along with Socialist Bingo tonight, I've put the link in the chat. And how this works is we go ahead and generate a bingo card. Every bingo card is different. You get a free square in the middle. Do we have solidarity twice tonight? Yep. If you're lucky, you're going to get solidarity twice on this bingo card because I still haven't fixed that. But what we do is we go for lines or we go for corners. So if you get bingo on your bingo card, you can go ahead and shout it out in the chat. You won't win anything, but we will congratulate you and celebrate you and make you the comrade of the day. And then we go for blackout bingo after that. It should be a great night for Socialism Bingo. I'm really looking forward to it. It's just a way to keep us interested as we are delving into the realm of insanity. All right, guys, I want to just acknowledge the folks watching on Folks, FOLX, of course, on Odyssey, on Rockfin, on Rumble, on Gitter, and I think I'm even broadcasting on Twitter right now for the first time. We're going to try that out and see how that goes. And so, guys, welcome if you are new to Socialism Saturday. There's a couple things you need to know before we get started. Number one, I do have rules in my chat on YouTube. YouTube has the best chat of all the places that I stream on, but it is not an unmoderated chat. I do have rules if you want to participate. Rule number one, don't be a dick. Okay? What that means is you don't insult me. You don't insult other people in the chat. We want to create a nice environment for everyone because we are here to learn. I don't know everything about these people. I've learned a lot in the past several months, but this is my way of learning about socialism. It's everyone in the chat wants to learn about it as well. And so we can't learn when everyone is shitposting and insulting each other. All right. So just don't be a dick. Just rein it in. You are welcome to shitpost anywhere else on the internet. You just can't do it here. Rule number two, no whining. because I'm 42 years old and I don't want to deal with it anymore. I can't do it, guys. So if I ask you to stop doing something, I don't want to hear whining. I don't want to hear complaining. I don't want to hear how you're an oppressed, censored victim of the world. I just want you to stop doing it. That's it. I'm trying to create a nice environment. We can all learn here. The more that you complain, the less we are going to be able to focus on what we should be focusing on, which is the actual socialists among us. Now, I do also have additional notes that are unique to Socialism Saturday, which is if you are new and this is your first time watching real socialists, I do just want to warn you that you might have a hard time understanding what they're saying. Because even though they are speaking English, they speak in code. They have their own language. They have their own definitions. Oftentimes, they will take 87 words to say something when 3 words, quite frankly, could do just fine. And so when you first start listening to socialism, it takes a little bit of getting used to. It is quite literally like learning a new language. And so if you feel confused, I want you to know it's not you, it's them. But I promise you, if you stick with it, a couple episodes into Socialism Saturday, you're going to start understanding them and it's going to be a lot easier. I will also do my best to try to decipher some of the things that are coming out of her mouth to help you understand it and to help you connect the dots. I also do look in the chat because if you have ideas about what's being said and what it means, go ahead and chat it in. I will display it on the screen. We'll talk about it. Again, we are all here to learn together. All right. This is a group activity. And so I can't be the one to have all the good ideas. I'm looking to you guys to contribute as well. And many times we get into great discussions with people making awesome contributions in the chat. And I do really appreciate that. So just know if you can't understand them, that's okay. It's a second language you start to learn by osmosis after a couple of weeks. And then one final reminder, this is not about agreeing with the socialists because we don't agree with the socialists. Every once in a while, we might find a point where we overlap on, a broken clock is right twice a day, that sort of thing. But this is about understanding them and understanding their perspective and listening in for what they're doing in the world because they say the quiet part out loud all the effing time. And I firmly believe that if we just listen to enough socialism, they're going to lay out all of their plans for us in the open, having no gumption about it, because that's the way these people talk. So those are the guidelines for Socialism Saturday. If you have not yet, please mount that like button for me. And if you have not yet subscribed to the channel, I hope you will tonight. Welcome again to all the newcomers. Let's dig in, folks, and let's listen to Abolish the Family with Sophie Lewis.
The history, let's be real, of experiments in communizing child rearing have often been, messy. And guess what? So have all attempts at overthrowing capitalism so far, which doesn't mean that it was a mistake to try. Writing a book with a cover that says abolish the family is taken as provocative when that's actually genuinely not the intention. Abolition is the concept we have for a simultaneous destruction, preservation, and sort of transformation of something. We will find out what the social is.
She just said abolition. By the way, if you want to be able to identify a socialist in the wild, the 2 words they use all the time are liberation and abolition. So it's always important to listen for that. But she just said that abolition of something will lead to transformation. Now, the reason I bring that up is that we know from watching Queer Marxism that the term trans, which you might think of in terms of transgender, to socialists, the word trans no longer means transition. And maybe it never did. I'm not sure. But this is a mistake that people make is they say, well, you're trans, right? What are you transitioning to? Socialists don't believe that trans means transition. They believe it means transform. Okay? So that's fundamentally different. So when I say they're trying to get rid of both biological sexes, they're trying to transform gender.
When we stop running indoors to get our needs met, in this private realm. You can't overthrow capitalism, I think, without changing the family, and you also definitely can't change the family without overthrowing capitalism. If you did try to abolish the family without abolishing capitalism, you would create a nightmare worse than what we have.
This is the Verso Podcast. My name's Ben.
If you try to abolish the family without abolishing capitalism, you would create a nightmare. Just as a reminder, the 4 goals of the woke left are always and forever: gain as much power as possible, destabilize the system, attack capitalism, usher in their Marxist utopia. Everything these people do goes back to gaining as much power as possible, destabilizing the system, attacking capitalism, ushering in their Marxist utopia. Always remember that when you're watching the far left, or really any leftists. Naruto, watching your Nick Fuentes reaction stream last night, I realized the Horde desperately wishes that you were Nick Fuentes. Well, ain't that the truth, Naruto? Well, my own little Twitter loser horde desperately wishes I'm many things that I'm not. But, we can allow them to live in their little fantasies and read on the internet all they want. We're doing the real work here, but I do appreciate the super chat. Thanks so much.
Ben Smoke. I am the commissioning editor of Huck Magazine, and I'm here today with Sophie Lewis to talk about your new book, Abolish the Family, a manifesto for care and liberation, which I've already marked up. Okay, let's get cracking. Number 1.
Bot, cut it out, please.
Do you want to take my grandma away from me? Will you take her? Please. Take her.
I can't promise to take your grandma away.
Okay, well, I'm off then. I'll see you later.
Great, we're done here. No, it's a reasonable question, isn't it? Because people feel like, abolish means destroy. It sounds like abolishing the family, means perhaps separating people forcibly, which is obviously, well, maybe not obviously, but I think it would be a horrible thing. And indeed, it has happened at various points in history that people have tried to forcibly, enact forms of reorganization of households. Like I'm not about that. I'm not about forcibly separating people. And abolishing the family is, in a philosophical kind of way, you might want to say that it's about bringing people together for the first time rather than separating them, and figuring out a more...
Abolishing the family is about bringing people together for the first time rather than separating them. She seriously just said that. Why do you guys think that is? Why do you think this socialist believes that abolishing the family is necessary to bring people together for the first time rather than separate them?
Beautiful way to be together. But we can maybe expand on what I might mean by that later on. But for sure, no. Your gran has got to stay.
Exactly. Everyone belongs to everyone else.
I guess that's
This is Gloria. I'm so glad you said this, because I actually wouldn't have put it this succinctly. What she means when she says that abolishing the family will bring people together rather than separating them is everyone belongs to everyone else. What is that from? Does anyone know? Everyone belongs to everyone else. That's from Brave New World, my friends. When they didn't have a family, all kids born via surrogacy, the community raised the kids, everyone's having sex with everyone else. You will own nothing, and you will be happy.
Thing, isn't it? Because it would be fair to say there is some controversy.
Exactly, the state will unify us.
I haven't heard of it.
No, I mean it's been very, very low key. But there's a kickback, and there's a kickback. I was trying to think, because I was reading it kind of last night and trying to figure out, because we'll kind of get into the nitty gritty of it, but it makes a lot of sense from a left perspective when you sort of unpack it. But even from the left, there's this sort of you're trying to this is why no one likes the left. You're trying to steal people's families, your killjoys, etc. And this, I kind of wanted to ask you about that visceral reaction from people. You kind of talk about it in the book. You understand that emotional visceral reaction, but kind of unpacking why we have that. Because I could feel it myself when I was reading it, being like, I'm a mummy's boy without.
I want to highlight something that Yasmin is saying in the chat, and Yasmin is a Socialism Saturday regular, so we always appreciate her contributions. Socialists must be lonely or have bad families. Yasmin, it's interesting that you say that, because I have read, well, I haven't read the whole thing. I have read parts of one of Sophie Lewis's book. I think it was Feminists Against Family or something like that. I think it was the first one that she wrote. And in the introduction to her book about abolishing the family, she basically talks about how she had a horrible relationship with her father and how her father was so awful to her, and how her father basically told her that if she wasn't his biological child, then he wouldn't take care of her or any of these things. And so I think that Sophie Lewis has gone down this abolish the family track because she's working out all of her daddy issues on the internet. So I agree with you. Sophie Lewis, and she says this in her books too. She's like, the family is so horrible. It is the worst. People are harmed so much in the family. She's working out her issues with her own family by trying to abolish everyone else's.
No doubt. And I could feel myself being like, not mama. No.
Yeah.
And it is, one of those sort of like hits you right in the gut. So I wondered if you can kind of unpack that a little for us.
Yeah. Gosh, it's not something I'm consciously doing on purpose to sort of pick the topics, the real wasp's nests, the things that I think somebody put it to me, succeed at pissing everybody off somehow. But it does seem to be where I'm intellectually interested in going. And I am not.
Shall we unpack that?
Oh, yeah. That's what my analyst is for, I guess. But it's no, well, I suppose more on a more serious note, it's I suppose that I'm called to the challenge of thinking about these really difficult questions of how those intimate spheres are affected by capitalism and how they are political. And the family is this thing that we don't think about as an economic institution or a state institution. We think about it as we don't think about it in a way. And when we do, I think there's a kind of understanding that it flows naturally from the fact of human childbirth or something like that, and that you are living with who it is sort of naturally or cosmically ordained for you to live with, and you love them for reasons that are almost like beyond comprehension. That your people, whether they're sort of biologically or legally sanctioned, are your people in a way that has always been this way. People's visceral reaction is something I foreground because I don't think anybody really, very few of us have no fear of the idea of a radical change in the domain of family. We're manufactured through it. It's actually asking you to contemplate something that you cannot contemplate because you are you because of the family. It's how you were produced. So there is a little bit of a heady dimension to this. When people have talked about it in the past, they've insisted that there has to be some element of tolerance
Absolutely.
among us, the utopians, for the unknowability of what that would look like, to have a story about people and how they are made, how we are made, that is to use a bit of a jargonistic word, like non-dyadic, right? Not necessarily viewing people as an addition process of mom and dad, which, I mean, there's more to unpack, but we basically don't know what a post-Oedipal like landscape psychologically for people would be, and we have to tolerate that. But in the meantime, what we can, I think, project ourselves into or imagine is what the world would be like if materially people weren't sort of a bit blackmailed into relying exclusively on the private household for care. So that's not about trying to change the relationships.
So this is how they frame the abolish the family discussion. Sophie is saying that because of capitalism, we all have to rely on the private household for care. Now, remember, socialists want to abolish all private property. Your house, your car, your business, but they also believe that children should not be property of the parents because that would be private property. Children should be property of the collective, the state. So when they're saying abolish private property, that is to include children because they believe that the community, the collective, should be responsible for caring for everyone. Does that make sense? Sergeant Rosie, thank you for the super chat. It's as if she had a horrible family, then everyone else has to have the same experience and no one should have a family. That's exactly right. That's exactly what Sophie says in the introduction of her first book that I read not too long ago. I wrote a Substack article on it. But that is what she believes. But they also believe that care should be collectivized. And so they're saying basically and Sophie literally does say this in the introduction to her book. She says, it's really unfair that we are putting the job of getting pregnant on these women because pregnancy is really dangerous and it can really be harmful, and so we shouldn't be doing that in the family unit. We should find other ways to do that, like surrogacy, where they're gestating babies in dead bodies, and that the family is going to do more emotional harm to the children than the community would, and things like that.
That are nearest and dearest to you. It's about everything else, paradoxically. It's about building the world with all the sort of, I don't know, healthcare, even cooking and food provision services, therapeutic and educational services and infrastructures that would mean that the family was a domain of real choice or real freedom, and you weren't coerced into needing it so much. Yeah, but I think the visceral reaction makes complete sense. I have it too. I wrote my first book about the labor of pregnancy at a time when my mother was dying of cancer, and we had quite a difficult relationship, but there was a lot of love and care at her deathbed, and it was quite an intense tension or paradox in some people's minds that I would be writing about the attempt to hold this person who birthed me and parented me in a comradely way as she
in a
died,
comradely way,
while recognizing that she deserved a lot more than the family throughout her life, and that she was, in a way, quite care deprived, in a way that I
listen to this. Listen to how they're framing this. You deserve better care than your family can offer you. Your children deserve better care than you can offer them, and you are doing all this labor when instead we could just have these children and you and the elderly among us cared for by the community, and they will get better care in which than they are getting within the family. I mean, has anyone ever had a relative in like an old folks home? Because that's kind of like what I'm thinking of. When I think of like community care, I'm thinking of when my grandmother had a stroke and then got put in an old folks home because my grandfather could no longer take care of her, and the old folks home proceeded to drug my grandmother up to high heaven, to where the point where my grandmother didn't even know where she was and who she was, and no one seemed to think this was a problem. That's kind of what I think about when I think of like community care, is the fact that my grandmother spent the last years of her life literally not knowing who she was and who her family was because of all the drugs that the nursing home, by the way, not a cheap nursing home, the most expensive, nice nursing home, like in the area in which she lived, like what they did to her. Like, that's what I think of when I think of community care. So you'll have to pardon me if I just feel a little bit skeptical that the community is going to be able to provide better care than the family.
certainly could not, reverse by by loving her enough, no matter how much I tried, right? And understanding in a very deep way that if you love your family, you want family abolition, paradoxically.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what comes through quite a lot in the book, and this idea of love and the way in which we're conditioned to experience, expect, and see it through the family. I guess that kind of to follow on from the idea of this visceral reaction to it. It's almost, in order to kind of get to a point of saying, well, I'm a family abolitionist, one needs to kind of decolonize one's mind when it comes to love. And I think you kind of explore a bit about this idea that love is the thing that we're supposed to be striving for. Love is where we're like what we want. That's the you put it way more articulately than that. I'm gonna let everybody read it rather than just quote you. And I that was kind of as I was kind of working through it was,
Yes, that is the argument that's being made.
I found
Gwendolyn.
myself kind of being challenged and challenging my own conception of love. And because for me, my socialism has always been, it's for a small L love of humanity, as wet as that sounds.
Yeah.
But it's this idea that everybody deserves love and deserves happiness and deserves care. And then, but it sort of
So
hadn't.
Sophie just, or was it Sophie or was it, I think it was the interviewer, but John Morgan says decolonize one's mind. What do you guys think they mean when they say to decolonize your mind? I think I have a guess about what it means, but I want to hear from you in the chat. When they say decolonize your mind, what do you think they mean by that? And while we're waiting for some answers to come in, because there is a slight delay, guys, please go ahead and mount that like button for me. This really helps for more people to become aware of the stream. YouTube is more likely to promote the stream when you mount the like button. And so please make sure you're always mounting or caressing or doing whatever you want to the like button, as long as it's hit. That's enough for me. Yep. So getting rid of your idea of what the family is. Yep. I think that's a good definition of decolonizing your mind. Get rid of internalized capitalism. Yep. Capitalism equals colonialism. Bill, I think that's a really salient point. When they're saying to decolonize, yep, bot, become a socialist. Yes, Akshay, I think this is actually the most simple definition of what it means to decolonize your mind, is to change the way you think. Basically, again, remember, 4 goals of the woke left are: gain as much power as possible, destabilize the system, attack capitalism, usher in a Marxist utopia. In order for them to achieve those goals, you need to completely unlearn everything that you know about, capitalism being good and the family being good and these being things that we should uphold. And you need to get rid of those ideas that you've been taught your entire life, because then you can do things like reject capitalism and whiteness. Exactly, Chris. Go Fly That Kite says decolonize your mind equals to submit your mind to colonization by socialism. That's exactly right. If you have these crazy ideas that you like owning your own stuff and like you like your family and don't want to get rid of it, that's going to be a colonized mind, whereas they need you to get rid of that so that they can usher in their little Marxist utopia. I think this is also really good. Magnificent Devil. Reject Western culture. Excellent. You guys are doing to become a true believer. Yup, I think that's a really good one. When you decolonize your mind, you can become a true believer. You can say, we are the Borg. Exactly. Brainwash yourself. Exactly, Sin. Exactly. The deconstruction of the unconditional love in family. Exactly. Well done, guys. Awaken to critical consciousness. I think that might be how James Lindsay might define it, Christopher. Thank you for that. Wipe the slate. You guys get it. You know what they're talking about. Let's continue. Oh, wait, we got a super chat coming in. I'm going to do this at the same time while we're still paused. Sorry for that. Beth, thank you for the super chat. They know the traditional family influences children's morality and the world, and so you need to eliminate those influences. No, I don't think that's it. because they're not just saying abolish the family for people that we disagree with. They're saying abolish the family for everyone. And I think that we can all agree, Beth, and well, maybe you won't agree to this, but I think many of us would agree with the fact that there are many children who come out of, so-called like right-wing conservative Christian households who go on to be like these people, and because the family is not actually influencing their morality. Children are much more, I know people don't want to hear this, but in many cases, children are much more influenced by the schools and by the teachers. They're spending more time with the schools and the teachers than they are with their own parents. A lot of parents aren't even talking to their own kids. And so I don't think that this is exactly correct. Maybe in some cases, but this is not why they want to abolish the family. But I do appreciate the super chat.
Ever occurred to me that conception of love,
Well, it's the
was
public
in of itself
schools, not just the
infected
colleges,
by
public schools.
the kind of behemoth of capitalism. And I kind of, maybe one of the most ugly segues that's ever existed. I want to go from that into the people that have kind of come before you, that began this kind of journey of abolitionism. I wondered, because you kind of do a kind of potted history.
You don't get your money back just because you get an
family
answer you don't
abolitionism. I
like.
wondered if you could
Sorry.
maybe take us on a whirlwind
It's not how
tour
that works.
of that.
That's
because
not how
I think it's actually
capitalism
really
works, Beth.
important to like recognize where these thoughts come from.
Yeah.
And kind of how we've got to the place that we're in right now.
Thanks. Yeah. Gosh. Well, a lot of people assume that I would start the potted history with Plato, because there's some stuff in, Socrates'
I got you. We're
remarks
good.
about the just society that could be called family abolition. But since it's not about movement, I'm not really as interested in it.
Mhm.
But a lot of philosophy, bioethical scholars love to still talk about, sort of debate Plato's case for abolishing the family and I'm mentioning it partly because I suppose the useful element of it is just the really simple principle Socrates has, that it's unfair, which is a little sort of odd if you're convinced that, nature makes it so. But he's talking about the lottery of a human infant being sort of thrown into a particular household that then happens to completely circumscribe that future person's class identity and fate. And
Hang on. The philosophist says what's amazing is they have no plan on how their utopia will actually come about after they destroy every staple of society. Oh no, they do. They have plans. We actually watched a previous episode, actually with Sophie Lewis. It was when she was giving a lecture at the University of Pennsylvania, which is an Ivy League school, and she was talking about how they actually have what did she call them? Marxist revolutionary urban planners. It was something like that. They actually have like their own urban planners that are planning for what society looks like after they overthrow capitalism and usher in their Marxist utopia. And you know what it looks a lot like? These 15-minute cities that are being discussed. In fact, on a previous episode of Socialism Saturday, Sophie Lewis actually talked about getting rid of kitchens, of private kitchens in households. Because why would you need your own oven and stove and refrigerator? Because you can just go to the community kitchen and get all your food from the community. And they have these urban planners that are putting these exactly 15-minute cities plans in place to make sure that you can just go get your food from the comrades that are assigned to cook the food. That's real. So when you guys heard Joe Biden, and I actually have a clip on my channel of this, you guys can go look it up. When you remember when Joe Biden was like, we need to get rid of all gas stoves? That comes from somewhere. It comes from these people, because these people are actively at Ivy League universities talking about getting rid of the kitchens, our own personal kitchens that we have in our houses. You're welcome.
that in a sense it we should take a more collective responsibility for the raising and nurturing of future humans. But as I said, I'm actually only interested in the people who were dreaming of ways to struggle together, which is a different history. And where I begin is the French utopian socialist Charles Fourier. It's a little bit of a pronunciation issue.
I think you nailed it. Do you like how I managed to work myself out of not having to say his name?
I was very impressed.
Thank you. Until I get paid the big bucks.
I'm gonna call him Charles.
Yeah, Charlie, I reckon.
Charlie.
Big
Charlie. Je suis. And he was, such an odd duck. Definitely had some extraordinary, like, scientific opinions about the almost ecological future that would be brought into being by abolishing bourgeois society. And the trope about
Abolishing bourgeois society. What does that mean? What does it mean to abolish bourgeois society? What does bourgeois mean? What does proletariat mean? Where do those words come from? Where have we heard those words before? I'm going to wait for people to send in some of their thoughts about that in the chat. And we're going to take this super chat from Jay Hundo. Thank you, Jay. By shorting a stock, you make money when it goes down. When it goes down, reinvest when it goes back up. If the board is idealist, pressure from investors. Okay. Thank you, Jay. I don't know what that means in the current context. If you want to chat in some clarification, maybe I'm just not getting it. But I do appreciate the super chat. So let me see what you guys have to say about abolishing bourgeois society. Abolish the rich. Well, it's not just the rich. The rich is not the only people who would be bourgeois. Exactly. Bourgeois is the bosses, the landlords, the people who own private property, the people who own businesses. Not all businesses. Some of them are okay. They're totally fine with some businesses, but it mostly is around people who own property. You have this is why you guys remember during, like, in the beginning stages of the pandemic, they were very anti-landlord. Even if the landlord was, like, kind of like a middle-class Latinx guy who just, like, bought a property to have, like, rental income, they're very, very against that. So when they're saying bourgeois, I want you guys to think private property just because it's easier to think of it that way. That's really what they mean. Even middle class, not just the uber wealthy. So when AOC is wearing that dress that says tax the rich, it's not about the like the top 1%, the millionaires and the billionaires, or now it's just the billionaires according to Bernie because he's a millionaire now, so he doesn't like to talk about that anymore. But we are talking about even middle class people who own private property. Well done.
Utopia as somewhere where the rivers flow lemonade.
Mhm.
That kind of comes from him because he felt that anyway, this is a bit of a sidebar.
Sidebar me. I need this in my life. I need to understand.
No, it's a wonderful element of his imagination, that the whole metaphysical, the biophysical world. Fourier felt that the biophysical world would be affected by the transformation of human social relations. So he had some sort of strange geoengineering ideas about, like, sweet rivers and
That's some, like, 4 a.m. at the afters shit.
It's amazing.
It's incredible.
He says that rather than sharks and lions, which are bad,
Mhm.
there will be anti-sharks and anti-lions in the future. So this is a really silly way of convincing you that we should revisit this guy. But
Oh, that's how you fight communism
And,
with capitalism, to short stuff.
Contrary
Okay, I got it, Jay. That makes
to,
sense.
mainstream cultures,
Thank you.
stories about feminism and lists of sort of history's important feminists. The two people that I begin with, Charles Fourier and Alexandra Kollontai, are not listed.
Hang on, we got a super chat coming in from Sin. Sin says it means everyone, even the poor, because the poor have children and children are a property in their minds. Well, that's a really good point, Sin. I hadn't actually thought about that. So yeah, you're right. Children are property. So that is exactly what they mean as well. Excellent. Excellent. I also want to talk. So there's a show on Netflix from where is it from? It's like Brazil or something like that. It's from some, like, it's called The 3%. Has anyone watched this show on Netflix? I only watched, like, the first season and, like, part of the second season, but it's basically about this kind of like like the world has descended into like insanity, but there's this island that exists that only 3% of the population get to go to, and the island is like a perfect utopia, but you have to pass like a test to be able to go to this island. But you kind of find out that when you get to the island that maybe it's not like all it's cracked up to be. That's kind of like how I kind of envision the reality of like their Marxist utopia is like, it might sometimes look great on the outside. Brazil, it is Brazil. You're right. But maybe not so all that it's cracked up to be on the inside. It's an interesting show. I just haven't watched the rest of it yet because I don't watch TV, but it is actually an interesting show.
Despite the fact that the French utopian socialist was the guy who came up with the word feminism. He should be the original girl boss in a certain sense. And so should Kollontai, who was one of the first ever ambassadors for a nation state on the world stage. She was a family abolitionist, left Bolshevik. I mean, this is skipping 100 years. It just really amazes me that this consciousness has sort of been lost, that the original sort of I'm using this term girl bosses and now I'm committed to it. We're committed to the destruction of the private nuclear household and the dyadic parenting form. So Fourier is talking about this communalized way of living. I think he says it should be 1,200 people or so in a very specific architectural
Hang on. Vince is asking a question that I think is important and might be something that people need to hear. Vince says, maybe I'm being dense, but don't these folks see the fundamental paradox in their philosophy that in abolishing the family and private property, they make the state into the ultimate landlord? No, they don't. And this is one of the craziest things about watching socialism is that they really do not understand that they think, and people who have been around for Socialism Saturday can correct me if you think I'm wrong. These people really think they are fighting against the state. They have no concept that they are creating, because again, their goal is to attack capitalism, which they believe is running everything and is responsible for all evils in the world, so they can usher in a Marxist utopia in which the worker will rise up and be benevolent, and everyone will take care of everyone, and you will own nothing, and you will be happy, and everyone belongs to everyone else, and that sort of thing. They really have no concept that they are going to create a state that is going to impose its will onto everyone. Exactly. They're redefining what the state is. They think this is why they use, we are liberating ourselves. We are abolishing the state. We are abolishing these systems. We are decolonizing all of this stuff. They think they're freeing people when in fact they're building the prison that we're all going to have to live in, because there ain't no such thing as a utopian state.
Home with provision for some privacy, but also a lot of things, carefully organized to be done together intergenerationally. It's all very anal. He has a plan and a timetable for the utopia of the future.
This man he's gone in. See, all I'm imagining right now is like a warehouse in Manor House, but like expanded out. One of those like chaotic, the ones where you wake up in the morning and you're there and you're like, oh no. Oh, I've made an error.
Well, he would be right with you, because queer orgies were very much part of his future society. And
I love this guy even more. The more and more I hear about him. Rivers of Lemonade, anti-sharks, queer orgies. Let's go. What are we still doing here?
And I think that's exactly the spirit to revisit these things.
So one of the things that I think is so interesting about some of the stuff coming out of the socialist conference, and even we saw this. So one of the things that they talked a lot about at like the socialist conference, and that other I've seen other socialists talking about it as well, is non-traditional family structures. Have you guys seen this lately? They're talking. So the organization that I exposed called Translate Gender, that was at the socialist conference last week, they talk about doing psychotherapy around helping people with non-traditional family structures. And so when I'm hearing things like queer orgies coming from the abolish the family people, yep, we're talking about like polyamory, essentially. And of course they don't want people to be married. They just want like all these like, thruples and all this stuff. And again, these people, the polyamorous relationships aren't producing kids because kids are all produced via surrogacy. They're actually putting systems in place to help create these alternative family structures, many of which are going to include these queer orgies, because they talk about that stuff a lot in queer Marxism. It is really crazy. I mean, this is what they mean by decolonizing the mind, I guess. Jen, thank you for the super chat. Dr. K, I watched the OG version of Invasion of the Body Snatchers early this morning. Granted, communism, not socialism, though not far off from each other. That is such a good movie, Jen. I was actually just thinking about this movie the other day. I recommend everyone, if you've never seen the OG version of Invasion of the Body Snatchers, it is well worth your time. And it rings true with a lot of this stuff that we talk about. So I appreciate you reminding me about that, Jen, and thank you for the super chat. All right, guys, please make sure you mount that like button for me if you have not already. You're watching Socialism Saturday. We watch Real Socialism on my channel every Saturday at 6 p.m. Come and join us to see the most dystopian of the dystopian, and please make sure you subscribe to my channel if you have not already. I appreciate it.
Goes in because it's certainly not the the program that you want to take. And
sorry, Beth, I didn't see this when it happened, but I do see it in my studio now. And Beth gifted 10 memberships to my channel. And so thank you, Beth, for that. I'm sure there were some lucky recipients that do appreciate it. Cool.
And adopt. But it is, I think, the sensibility that everything could be different. And that, for example, children and women might deserve to be sort of busted out of the architecture of the private kitchen, for example. And a lot of people were inspired by him for a long time after he died. And there were lots of experiments with communes, and those imploded and went badly. And the history, let's be real, of experiments in communizing child rearing and moving beyond the coupled private nuclear household have often been messy, and you could argue just defeats, failures, and guess what, so have all attempts at overthrowing capitalism so far, which doesn't mean that it was a mistake to try or that it remained, we can right, this is sure. No, but I think people are really keen to say the kibbutz, massive failure, communes, massive failure. Let's abandon any attempt to transform the terrain of our home lives, because that can only turn into totalitarian disaster. I think that's a wrong conclusion. And in any case, we don't actually have a choice but to transform our intimate lives, because capitalism is there as well. It will have to change. This is the scary thing about revolutionary transformation. It will automatically, but hopefully in a way that we can determine consciously together, like change how we love. And Fourier was talking about bourgeois society's hypocrisies in a way that was very kind of inspirational to Marx and Engels. And then Kollontai, who talks about love as something
don't give him any ideas, F in the chat,
the germ of property. So she has this concept, property love.
Hang on.
I think a really.
We need to rewind that. I was laughing at F in the chat's comment here. Infected. Did you hear what she just said? Infected with the germ of property. Let's rewind and listen to that bit again.
To Marx and Engels. And then Kollontai, who talks about love as something that is infected with the germ of property.
Love is infected with the germ of property. Wow. Okay, Sophie, please explain to us how love is infected with the germ of property.
So she has this concept, property love, which is, I think, a really interesting and important understanding of how the love that we deserve as human beings is not fully available to us yet under conditions of capitalism, because we cannot help but view the objects of our love in a slightly proprietarian or possessive way.
Oh my God. We can't truly love one another because to love one another means to own one another. Like, you can't truly love your children because there's a sense of ownership. You can't truly love your husband and your wife because there's a sense of ownership. Do you guys think that it is a coincidence that in Brave New World, they said everyone belongs to everyone else? Because that way, no one owns everyone else and no one has resentments for owning everyone else. Oh yeah, that's going to get clipped, guys. Don't you worry about that. That's absolutely going to get clipped. Wow. That's it. We've watched Sophie quite a bit. I've watched Sophie at least 5 times on this channel. I've never heard her say that before. That's Sophie, that is next level insanity.
And she says that in order to unleash the social force of a sort of red love, we will have to change materially some of the building blocks of our society to enable it to blossom. And so she thinks that that includes a little bit like Fourier, the private kitchen should
There it
be
is!
not the default, but perhaps
I told you guys earlier. That Sophie was the one we were watching that was talking about getting rid of the private kitchen. And she just brought it up again. She said, in order for us to fully embrace love, red love. They actually fucking called it red love. We're going to need to get rid of property, like, for example, the private kitchen. Because if you're cooking your own food in your own house, that means you are not part of the community in which you are belonging. Because really, you should be going to the communal area to get all your food from the socialists who are assigned to cook it.
certain basic needs of human beings in a society should by default be met in the public sphere or the common sphere.
The default needs of human society should be met in the public sphere. So what does that mean? Food, healthcare, education, everything. The default needs of society should be communal. Some might say collectivist.
Which is not to say that if you love cooking for your friends, you wouldn't be allowed to do that in your
how am I
private
going to make
home.
my fancy gnocchi now, mate?
Your gnocchi, are you good at making gnocchi?
I can't make it for shit, but I like to pretend I can. I buy it and then I just make it like fancy sauce.
Yeah, I love cooking for my
It's
friends.
cute. But I guess this is like part of, to kind of go back to that, the idea of the kind of love being infected by capital, being infected by property, even on a really small scale right now in London, say, like rents are through the roof.
Yeah.
And I know, well, I was having a conversation with a mate the other day and we were talking about the way in which
Exactly.
specific kind of market conditions really impact our, like, the speed of our relationships and the tone and timbre of our relationships. I know so many people who've sort of like got together and then 3 months later are moving in, not because that's how that relationship would naturally have evolved, but simply because £1,000 for a room, you know, on the wages that most people in the city are earning, is simply, you can't do it. And so people are sort of forced into this. So yeah, I think, you know, to talk about
Oh yeah,
love, to talk
housing
about
would be
relationships, to
communal
talk
too.
about any kind of
Remember, so when they're talking about society meeting our basic needs, it's food, it's healthcare, it's housing, it's education. Again, You alone nothing, and you will be happy.
Human interaction it necessitates the introduction of an analysis of capital, right? An analysis of capitalism, of the way in which it has infected everything. So, which I guess is the premise of the idea that one needs to abolish.
Yeah.
And I kind of wanted to talk a bit about that idea of abolition and the utility of it in this kind of frame, because there's a really good bit in it, because I was reading it and I was like, yep, agree, and then I was like, but abolition, should we expand? And then I got to that chapter and you literally said that and I was like, we are one mind. It's so true. But what I really liked about it was that you sort of you kind of detailed the arguments about the idea of expanding the family rather than abolishing it, changing it, evolving it. And also, I think quite rarely in these sort of texts, and said you were kind of compelled by them. They convinced you to a certain extent, and then went and kind of like knocked them down afterwards. But I guess that's sort of, for me, as I was reading it, as I was thinking more about abolition, and towards the end, you sort of talk about this. We're in this sort of great period of abolition. We've seen discussion around the abolition of the police, discussion of the abolition of borders, of border forces. That's quite an easy
Exactly,
thing
Jen. Thank you for the
in
super
some
chat.
ways, an easy thing to think, because the police, they're bad vibes. We don't want them. You know what I mean? Like they don't have a good energy. We're not getting anything from them apart from shit. And so it's quite easy to make that argument. Borders, slightly more complex, but also quite easy to be like, actually, do you know what? Yarswood doesn't seem great, does it? And most people will be like, yeah, you know what? Locking people up indefinitely, not on board with that. Whereas with the family, it's so entwined with love.
Yeah.
And love that people feel and
Absolutely.
treasure, and it becomes part of the core of who they are, and often how they sort of go on to do things in the world.
Well, let's pause right there while Sophie is looking like she doesn't have a soul, as Ben talks about how the family is love. And I'm going to go to this super chat from Half Orc Fighter, who says, I guess they're going to have to find me, and I'm making illegal hooch and roasting illegal foods for my friends and other free thinkers. Well, like Sophie likes to try to convince people, you're still going to be allowed to do that. Don't worry. You can still make food if you want to, but their premise is that it's going to be so great to not have to do any of these things that you're just going to willingly hand over responsibility to the state, and then you can go Half Orc Fighter and become a poet or an artist or a musician, because under socialism you're going to have just all this free time, because you're not going to have to worry about capitalism or cooking or healthcare or education, and you're going to be free to follow your bliss and become an artist that you are always meant to be. So that is the perception.
Comes their foundation. So I wondered if we could talk a bit about like how we I said decolonize before, but yeah, kind of decolonize our minds from that and get to this sort of abolish the family position. Big question. Just
no, it's the
one word answer.
Gosh, so you're exactly right that it is shocking, to compare prisons and the family. I'm certainly not saying that they're equivalent structures. Or I also am, really insistent though that what I've learned from the abolitionists who come up through the sort of prison industrial complex, anti-police, critical race theory, that abolitionist tradition that you're talking about, how they actually again and again.
Sophie, are you telling us, Sophie, that critical race theory is in the tradition of Marx? Because why would you bring it up in the context of abolishing the family? If and you being a professed Marxist yourself, publishing a book with a Marxist book publisher, just throwing willy-nilly for no reason in there that critical race theory is in this tradition as well. You don't say, Sophie. You don't say.
Again, explain that if we did burn down all the prisons today, certainly it would be a good thing, but it would not be abolition.
It'd be fucking chaos is what it would be. My kind of chaos, let's do it, but maybe not like a fertile ground for a fruitful utopia.
Yeah. Abolishing, if you really want to nerd out about it, is a concept that in everyday language, sure, tends to be used to mean destroy. But I, you know, and I appreciate that. That's why, you know, writing a book with a cover that says abolish the family is taken as provocative when that's actually genuinely not the intention. If I thought that there was a good alternative, I would say something less hurtful. I'm not actually getting kicks out of upsetting people, but there is, I think, something necessary about using this framework, because abolition is the concept we have for a simultaneous destruction, preservation, and sort of transformation of something, a realization of its promise. That's the beautiful thing that I take from the concept. So, and you're like, hang on, what are you realizing about prisons when you abolish prison? And what it is the promise of justice, which the prison industrial complex and the criminal justice system is a travesty of. This is how, the people who theorize about this dialectic, I think, teach the process of abolition. You have this infrastructure that says, we will keep you safe. And what it is actually doing in colonial white supremacist capitalism is very far from that, isn't it? It's murdering people, it's segregating people, it's infecting our imaginations with a sort of carceral attitude that shores up private property, etc., etc. I can't distill what the prison industrial complex does in the present, but it's not justice. And what abolition does is not burn down the prisons exactly, although it does maybe also do that, but it builds the world that would make prisons a sick joke.
When they're talking about abolishing prisons, the family, what have you, you always have to remember, I'm going to beat this dead horse. The 4 goals of the woke left are always and forever: gain as much power as possible, destabilize the system, attack capitalism, usher in a Marxist utopia. When they're talking about abolishing the prisons, abolishing the family, they believe that the prisons are a product of capitalism. They believe slavery was evil because it was capitalism. They believe that the police are descended from the people who were in charge of hunting down the escaped slaves, and so the police are directly connected to slavery, which is a result of capitalism. They believe that the family and seeing your children and your spouse as property, which Sophie just said earlier, is a product of capitalism. Every time they're talking about abolishing anything, they're talking about capitalism. And I know this is confusing because they're saying words like prisons, and so you guys mean that they do mean the prison industrial complex. They do. But you have to go one step further than that and understand that they think that it's bad because it's linked to capitalism. They think the family is bad because it's linked to capitalism. And all of this is about eliminating private property. That's what it's ultimately all about. We really try on my channel to go beyond kind of the surface level, because if you just get angry about she wants to abolish the family and how dare she and she wants to kill grandma and all that, okay, I mean, you can do that, you're like allowed, but the underlying factors that are leading them to that conclusion are actually significantly more insidious. And so you always, anytime they say abolition, you have to assume that whatever they want to abolish, they see it as capitalism in some way. Like when they say abolish whiteness, whiteness is code word for capitalism. Every time they say whiteness, white supremacy, racism, they mean capitalism, because that is their goal. And all of the chaos that they're trying to create in our society between the riots in 2020 and the pandemic and all of the things going on in the schools, that is all designed to destabilize the system, because all of this is about getting us to fight each other and about taking away the pillars that have built up Western society. It is all designed to destabilize the system so that they can attack capitalism as the ultimate nemesis. And once they attack capitalism, they're going to have to offer an alternative to that, which is going to be ushering in their Marxist utopia. I want to do a shout out for Mary over on Rockfin. Mary with the $10 tip. Thank you for an interesting show. Again, guys, we do Socialism Saturday every Saturday at 6 p.m. They won't all be abolish the families. We have to talk about other topics too, but this is generally the most dystopian of the dystopian. If you guys have topics you want me to address on Socialism Saturday, please let me know. You can DM me, you can send in a chat, you can send me an email at activelyunwoke@gmail.com, and I will do my best to try to accommodate it. But this is where we watch the farthest left of the far left. It is the most dystopian stream that you will see all week long. So please mount that like button if you are enjoying the show. We have, I'd like to get a lot more likes on this, because the more likes we get on the video, the more YouTube is going to recommend it to people, and then the more people can join us to learn about socialism. Won't that be great? So please mount that like button for me. And if you have not yet subscribed to my channel on YouTube or whatever platform you're watching on, I hope you'll consider doing so today so you can join us for future Socialism Saturdays and all of my streams in between. All right, let's get back to it.
A distant memory, that would make it a travesty in everyone's minds of the ideal
Good,
of
fine,
justice, like
Trendlin.
an unthinkable institution. That's the extent of abolition. It's no more and no less, Ruthie Wilson Gilmore says, than the changing of everything. Everything has to change. One thing, which is everything, which is the bad news.
Tricky. Just a little thing then,
yeah.
Yeah.
And so with family, I do think it's important to actually use the same word, because you're looking at this almost utopian ideal or aspiration that people have in connection with family, which is to be held almost unconditionally, to be known, to be loved, to really be there for one another in a way that is free from the market and from the state. That's what we hope.
See,
family is.
She just said that family is to be free from the market and to be free from the state. They think they're abolishing the state when they're in fact creating it.
I think on some level, more people than you would think know that it's not quite the case, that actually there is politics, for want of a better word, and the economy up in your business, in your private.
Truly all up there.
Just which but my potted history didn't get very far, because I'm always
sorry, that was my bad as well.
It's not
here's another thing I thought.
Well,
Let's go.
but it would take me hours, wouldn't it? I can't summarize. But I guess
there's a whole book on it. So.
Well, it's very short, which is one thing people love. But to sort of skip another 50 years from Kollontai, I guess, just to link in with what I'm saying here, the really epochal contribution of women's liberationists in the 60s and early 70s was to insist, to really hammer home on this point, that the home is not actually, although we all want it to be, a true sanctuary from the domination of the market and of the state.
This is where Sophie talks about how dangerous families really are. because she wants to convince people, in order to convince people to abolish the family, she has to convince people that like the biological family is really bad and is harmful and is emotionally harmful, and the only reason that we're even keeping it around anyway is to uphold the systems of capitalism. And she might even throw in there that pregnancy is like really dangerous for women, and why would anyone ever want to why would anyone want to have the family and all this stuff? Yeah. Well, I think Sophie has a female partner, I think is what Sophie has. And I say that because she's mentioned it before in other interviews that we've watched.
And so the the unorthodox Marxists of the Wages for Housework International Committee, and who summarized their position, Silvia Federici summarized the position as actually wages against housework. Nobody thinks that you could get wages for housework. Making that demand was an impossible declaration of war. It was a almost like a way of exploding the totality that they were saying exists between the factory and the social factory. They were saying that when Marxists rightly point to this hidden abode of production, where you have Marx kind of like drawing the curtain back to show you what actually goes on in the production of value, and it's this horrible thing where capital meets labor in the formal workplace. But then what this incredible moment, for me, the way I see it, in the early 70s, is that these women are saying there's another hidden abode behind this hidden abode. It's a hiddener abode. It's the
hiddenist.
The hiddenist, which is the family.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where it really gets difficult to think about the abolition of work, for example, as the supreme value in our society, which I do insist with, for instance, the wages for housework sort of autonomous tradition is the goal of proletarian struggle. It's not to make the workers be on top one day.
Yes, it is.
We all do like being on top every now and again, though.
Now and again.
Yeah.
But it's about
it's about workers being pillow queens forever.
It's about workers having abolished themselves as workers, Ben.
Sure. A much more sensible salient point.
but I think the challenge that we have to rise to is this insight that work and the family are one, and that you actually can't really have one without the other. So in my book, I think I say my definition of the family is almost, the family is the reason we want to go to work. It's the reason we have to go to work, and it's the reason we can go to work. And if you think about it like that, I think it really clarifies why it makes sense.
So if we don't have the family, we're all going to be able to not work and be artists? Is that what I'm hearing? These people always want to abolish work. That partially is what the pandemic was about, so far as I'm concerned. And like, I'm sorry, but that's a really bad idea. People need to work because work gives people a purpose. It gives them something that they can do with their time. It makes them feel like they're creating something. There's nothing wrong with work. But these people don't want to work, and so that's why we need to abolish the family. Makes total sense to me. Jen, these are the same talks sex traffickers have. How so, Jen? I want more information about that. Can you elaborate, please?
To talk in these slightly totalizing terms about the family, rather than constantly insisting, I only mean the white family, I only mean the bourgeois family. The family is bourgeois in this society.
The family
because
is
it
bourgeois.
privatizes care. You kind of get to why it doesn't make sense to almost like exclude the very people that are
The family is bourgeois. And then F in the chat saying Carlin is being bourgeois again. I'm gonna make a t-shirt for my Unwoke art store that says be bourgeois. I'm gonna do some sort. I don't know exactly what graphic I'm gonna create for it yet, but that's gonna be the next shirt going on with my store. Is like be bourgeois, embrace bourgeois, embrace property and capitalism and individualism and all of the things that these people hate. It's time to embrace and promote being bourgeois.
Closest to abolishing the family from family abolition by saying, your families are great.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? It's sort of like, we say queer family, we say, very rightly, there's a huge tradition of insisting,
Yes.
and I hope I do a lot of that
Make
too,
America
on the
bourgeois again.
resistant power of Black families against the state in the United
Exactly.
States, for example.
Be bougie.
Or, indigenous families against the colonial state, and so on and so forth. It's really intense to say family abolition in a context where, Palestinian families are essentially under
I'm gonna make the
fire,
bourgeois
right?
collection.
Being
That's gonna be
torn
tonight's
apart,
project.
or migrant families at the border.
But
it's
Bot is asking a question. What's a queer family? By the way, James Jones, thank you for the super chat. I do appreciate it. What do you guys think a queer family is? I know what a queer family is. I think that many of you have heard what a queer family is through hint hint Jeffrey Marsh hint hint. What do they mean when they say a queer family? We also saw this show up this week with that crazy gender clinic out in Northampton, Massachusetts, where they are doing psychotherapy around alternative family structures. Exactly. A queer family is anything that is not the traditional family unit. It is exactly bought, one that doesn't fit the standard. It is the family of choice. It is so anytime these people are saying queer, anytime they say queer, they don't mean gay. All right? This is going to be a new concept for some people. They don't mean gay. In fact, when I first started getting into this stuff 3.5 years ago now, I learned that I could be considered queer as a straight woman because I don't fit a traditional feminine stereotype. And so I can be a queer straight woman, even though I'm not a lesbian or have any of those like inclinations at all, because I don't fit the traditional feminine stereotype. Anytime they're saying queer, they basically mean one of their oppressed identities. So things like being in a polyamorous relationship or being trans or being anything that is outside of like basically straight white cis heterosexual male, that's going to be considered queer. Anything that is not the traditional societal structure, because remember, they're trying to destabilize society, right? Because when they destabilize society, they can blame capitalism for the destabilization, which would allow them to usher in their Marxist utopia. So they're trying to destabilize all of the things that we might consider to be normal. And that's what they mean by a queer family. It is not the traditional like biological family unit. It is a family of choice. Now, there's nothing wrong with having a family of choice. A lot of people have a family of choice. So that in and of itself is not inherently wrong. I'm not suggesting that you need to adhere to a certain familiar structure in order to be like, a productive member of society or anything like that. But I want you to understand the motivation behind these people saying the queer family, why they want to queer the family, what it means to them to queer the family. It means to destabilize the systems and structures of Western society so that they can blame capitalism for that destabilization, so that they can get people riled up about capitalism, so that they can then use that to create their worker revolution and usher in their Marxist utopia, in which none of us have private kitchens and none of us have private property and none of us have biological families, and in which we own nothing and will be happy. Do you guys see how this all works together? Let me know if I'm making sense. I want to make sure. It makes sense to me, but that doesn't necessarily mean it makes sense to you. So let me know if that makes sense. And Jen, thank you for the super chat. My love for Bot is queer. Well, Bot is certainly queer if there ever was one. And we say that with deep love and admiration for Bot. All right, guys, let's keep going.
It sounds like a horrible thing to say, but it's actually the important politics that we need in these exact points of violent intensity. Because if we cannot see beyond the valorization of family when we defend migrants who are being torn apart, for example, at the border, ultimately, I think we stay within the logic of a certain kind of respectability where people get admitted into the wages of familism.
Hang on, guys. Can I do a quick break because I have exciting news. I have exciting news that has nothing to do with socialism. All right. I just finished a shawl. Do you guys want to see the shawl I just finished? I literally just finished it while we're on the stream. And because I finished the shawl on the stream, I just want to take a quick moment. Everyone get up, do a stretch. If you need to go grab another drink, now's going to be the time. Just a quick break so I can show off my wares. I'm not selling it or anything. I still have to weave in the ends. But this is my latest Starflake shawl. I've made like 3 or 4 of these. And this one is really great because it's red, so it's perfect for Socialism Saturday. And what's great about it is the red is this beautiful, fuzzy, melted baby Surrey. And it looks so cool. Like, how gorgeous is that red? I mean, come on. Come on. All right. There's our moment of zen. I hope you all had a good break. Guys, please make sure you mount that like button for me if you have not mounted it already. It helps bring in more people to the channel because they need to learn about socialism too. Let's keep going.
Which, as we know,
Yes,
is not
our moment
working,
of shawl. Exactly.
That would be our horizon,
Mhm.
right? And I'm not saying we shouldn't do this. I'm not saying that people shouldn't protest
About
or
2 months.
demonstrate or riot in the name of stopping family separations.
Thank you, Beth.
In the United States where I live, we are anyone with, half an ounce of decency is obviously
I'm not. I didn't start it. I
demonstrating
didn't get the
to
yarn for it. I
stop
should have,
family
but I didn't.
separations, right?
Maybe I still
And
could,
I'm
but-
not saying that's that's wrong. I'm saying it's right. But the sensibility we need to have, I think, is that ultimately our horizon is not family reunification, which, by the way, sometimes doesn't work out very well for example, a queer child who is forcibly reunited with some biological or legal relatives that they will be perhaps even murdered by, right? You don't want to be forcibly reuniting family either. But can we not have enough subtlety to understand that we can work to take the boot off the neck of racialized, colonized families, proletarianized families, single working class moms and the rest of it, while also insisting that we deserve better than family as the technology for meeting all of our needs. So that's a bit of a long answer, but when you think about family as the privatization of care, that's what it is. It's the form that capitalism's privatization of care takes. Then you sort of start to see that none of us, no matter how creative we are with our kinship, and I'm not against, all the things I sort of mentioned about like creative, queer, non-white forms of doing family, that's not sort of something I dismiss or think isn't part of the horizon. But you ultimately wouldn't say expand when you're understanding what you're talking about as an organized scarcity, like an organized form of austerity. You don't expand that, you abolish it, right?
I guess part of the maybe the issue, the problem, the kind of contention here, or contradiction maybe, is that maybe it's best sort of talked about
Yes,
in
she does.
intermediary
She
demands
does.
and
Sure.
revolutionary demands, right? Because, for example, the right to family life is enshrined within the European Convention on Human Rights. It's something that is utilized, um, often by people fighting the sharpest edges of the hostile environment here in the UK, for example, as a way of trying to circumnavigate the worst excesses of, this government's fascistic border policies. And so, we, as people that believe that they shouldn't exist, kind of have to bolster that.
Yeah.
But the flip side of that is that it means that there becomes this narrative about single men.
Yeah.
And they're kind of deserving the undeserving. If we're going to look at it specifically through kind of like migrant rights
Yeah.
lens, and that in of itself is deeply problematic
Yeah.
and difficult, and kind of propagates this deserving haves and have-nots, and that to me very much sits within the lens of this kind of overarching family narrative. And it's sort of, how do you, and it's probably, it's a question almost without answer, because how do you fight for
Hang on. So Trendolin's saying, I'm going to take a point of personal privilege and I want to speak to this. Trendolin says, I understand why you don't have debates, but I think it might expand your reach. The problem is, Trendolin, like that first of all, it may expand my reach, but it would also impact my personal sanity, which, if I'm going to be living in this space day in and day out for 10 to 15 hours a day, I need to create a certain level of like calm and like no nonsense or bullshit environment. And that just doesn't lend itself well to that debate bro culture that exists on YouTube, which, no offense to people who like the debate bro culture, it's just not my thing, like, at all. Also, and I say this not meaning to be disrespectful, however, I'm about 9,000 times smarter than most of the people, not all, but most of the people who are participating in that debate bro bullshit. And so I would have to lower myself to a standard that I simply don't feel comfortable lowering myself to in order to appeal to the audience who is inclined to watch that. Now, I'm not saying that everyone who watches that are stupid. I'm really not. There are some very smart people that watch it. Occasionally, very good points get made. But my experience with being exposed to that type of audience, and mostly in 2020 when my YouTube channel was really growing, is that most of them are not that smart. And it put me in a position for a couple of years where I had to feel like I was appealing to the lowest common denominator. And in appealing to the lowest common denominator, I was actually ignoring the really smart people who exist in this space, who I would prefer to spend my time with. It's no shade. I'm not saying they're bad people or anything, but I don't want to lower myself. Also, in regards to like Marxists specifically, there's no point in debating people like this because they're not going to change their minds. And I quite frankly don't want to be beating my head against the wall, excuse me, trying to convince them to. And I'm pretty sure that I am in many different ways. And so no, I just choose not to. I need to maintain a certain level of sanity, and I kind of like flying under the radar, if I'm honest. It makes stuff easier for me. But I do appreciate it. And I do know that people want me to go out there more and to be on the shows. I did that, guys. I did that in 2020. I'm not saying I won't do it occasionally where it makes sense to do it, but I feel really happy and comfortable with where I'm at right now. And I just want to stay in my nice little cocoon where I'm around people that I like, and I don't want to appeal to that nonsense. So, well, I appreciate the good wishes and the ideas. I think I'm good for the moment, but thank you. Yes. Plus they'd send in their trolls. I'd have to deal with all that. It's just like it creates a whole level of headache that I am just not willing to engage in.
these things that you need to unpick
Yeah.
without
Yeah.
fucking everybody essentially that's needs them.
Yeah.
And I guess the kind of the other contention or contradiction to a certain extent is, I think you write about it as the family as this sort of shield,
Yeah.
as this place of sanctuary. kind of small s sanctuary, I guess, in this sense of queer families that kind of come together, and you speak a lot
Family of
about
choice, Jeffrey Marsh, queer
Black
family.
families
That's
in
what that means.
America and kind of maroon communities, and throwing off
Maroon
colonizers and
communities. What
stuff.
does that
And I
mean?
think it's like it's really
Huh.
it's a really kind of difficult terrain, right, to kind of maneuver yourself through, to give, as you sort of said, to give the space and the recognition of these collections of people as potential sort of incubators of revolutionary thought, practice, acts, whilst also saying, actually, we do need to get rid of that. It's sort of being like, we love what's growing in the petri dish, but the petri dish is actually going to have to go on the fire as well. And people are a bit like, I quite like that. That is my favorite petri dish. So can you not burn it?
It's a complicated one, isn't it? Because the word family, as you're kind of saying, is the word that people
Couple
on the
hundred
margins use
at
for
the
what
moment.
they're experimentally creating and sustaining and remaking fresh every day, which in a certain sense is very contradictory to the proprietarian institution of family. And so we have language as an imaginative limit or tension here, and there is the fact that these
We have language as an imaginary limit or tension. Language is one of the key things that these people use to confuse you guys. And so if you're new to socialism, just remember that they are almost always trying to confuse you with language and with definitions. And you always have to, when you're listening to them, don't assume that just because you think you know the definition of a word, that they are using the same definition of the word, because they might be using the word that you know, but that doesn't mean that they're using it in the same way. And what you always need to do is listen to the context in which they're using it and how they're using it and the ideas they're associating with it, because you have to be able to suss out what they actually mean. Exactly. One of the reasons it's so confusing to watch socialism, and we spend so much time doing it every week, is because these people have created their own language that we are all learning by osmosis. And when you listen to them for a couple hours every week, you're going to start seeing their language show up in people you know in the real world, like your kids' teachers. And when your kids' teachers or other people that you run into in the real world start using language that sounds like them, that should be setting off every single warning bell that you have in your head to be like, oh, I know, you're one of them, you're one of them. That's part of the reason that we do this, because I want you guys to be able to learn their language, which you will do in watching a couple weeks of Socialism Saturday. You'll start to kind of like integrate it. And then once it shows up in the real world, you're going to be able to identify it, even when it's out of context.
These families are often not families in the sense of being sacred in the
Thank
eyes
you,
of the
LimeWired. I
state.
appreciate the
Like,
clarification.
So this is a sociological and sort of Black feminist point that has been made for a very long time, that to put it in the most polemical way that exists in that tradition of scholarship, the Black family is an oxymoron in the sense that the state can always penetrate its boundaries. The whole thing about a family, in the sense that the critical tradition I'm operating within talks about it, is that the police cannot simply barge inside it. That's the concept, because that's the contract with the state. And it has a very sort of interesting valence. Its roots in sort of property law, or there's almost a Renaissance era legal principle that is about a man's house is his castle.
Yeah, number two.
And then settler colonists sort of adopt this. In North America, if you think about the imaginary of the the man with a gun who's sort of don't tread on me, come into my
Look how
land,
red.
my
Cheers,
property,
everyone.
and I will shoot you, and I can't wait actually for you to try. That whole imaginary is, I think, pretty part and parcel of the family. Like, people are always saying, aren't they, kind of,
Do you guys mind if I rewind this section? She's making some sort of analogy about the family being like private property, and I'm not quite sure I understand the analogy that she's making. And I just want to watch it again because I was focused on pouring my beer. Cheers. This beer is called Skittily Biddly Bop, and it is a kettle sour ale brewed with raspberry, blueberry, vanilla, and coffee. If you're drinking something interesting, please make sure to chat it in, and I'll rewind that section in a moment. Coaster Trek, thank you for the super chat. Would parentless kids be raised in a state-run reform school? Well, there would be no parentless kids, because remember, these people want the community to be the family. And so there would be no parents. There would be the community taking care of the kids, and they would all be raised. And the community, remember, the collective they want to abolish all private property. So they want to abolish your house. Like, you will own nothing and you will be happy. They want the state to provide your living, like where you're going to live, like North Korea. The state's going to provide your education. The state's going to provide your health care. The state's going to provide your car. And the state's going to provide and allocate your family, because we're abolishing all private property. And these people believe that the family is private property. They believe that kids and a spouse, that's all private property. So they want to get rid of it. And the state's going to provide everything you need, even your food. You're going to have these communal kitchens. You won't need a private kitchen anymore. Sophie's already talked about that. And so there will be no parentless kids, because the state will assign them to wherever they're supposed to live. And if that family, quote unquote, if that unit shits the bed, they will simply reallocate the child to someone else. And then the state will provide all the education, the state will provide all the care, the state will provide everything. Mommy and daddy government has got it under control. Does that make sense? That's what we're talking about. All right, let me rewind just a little bit. We're 42 minutes in. We have about half an hour more of this presentation. Of course, I do commentary over the presentation to try to make sure that everyone understands. If you have questions about the presentation, please make sure you chat them in. I am monitoring the chat on YouTube. I apologize if you're on Odyssey, Rockfin, Rumble. I can't see your chats there because it's too many things at once, but you can chat in on YouTube. And if you guys have thoughts about what they're saying, please make sure you chat those in as well. I can't be expected to have all the good ideas, and I want to hear from you guys as well. Zacko Crazy says, kids are slaves to parental ideologies, thus kids as assets are wasted. Instead, kids should be state assets to promote state-sponsored society and learn state ideologies. That's exactly right, Zacko. That is exactly the ideology. All right, let me rewind a little bit and we can listen to Sophie talk about something relating to the family to private property.
That's the contract with the state, and it has a very sort of interesting valence. Its roots in sort of property law, or there's almost a Renaissance era legal principle that is about a man's house is his castle, and then settler colonists sort of adopt this in North America. If you think about the imaginary of the man with a gun who's sort of don't tread on me, come into my land, my property, and I will shoot you, and I can't wait actually for you to try. That whole imaginary is, I think, pretty part and parcel of the family. Like, people are always saying, aren't they?
She lives in Philadelphia.
Kind of, apropos nothing, they will say, I would kill for anyone comes for my kids. I will.
Yeah.
You have really, liberal feminists will write texts about, feminism in general, and then suddenly the topic of children will come up, and they'll say, I've got a child. If anyone ever tried to hurt her, I might kill them. And you're like, what? Who? There is something about the proprietary. Like, who said that? Where did this come from? People are really convinced that children as property is the area where all violence is justified in its defense, in defense of private property and defense of one's own children.
This woman is so detached from any form of reality. She really doesn't understand why people are willing to fight to the death for their children. Like, something obviously happened in this woman's childhood. She's really saying, I can't understand why these feminists who claim to be feminists, anytime you bring up the children, they just get really possessive over the children and they say, I would do anything to protect my children. It really is like something happened to this woman during childhood where it is not computing that parents, biological parents, do have an emotional connection to their children. That is part of how biology works. It works that way for a reason. She doesn't get it. The philosophist, thank you for the super chat. I appreciate your perspective. You cut through a lot of BS. People need to learn about this stuff. I like your Twitter posts a lot too. Thank you. Thank you for the super chat. I do really appreciate it. Wait, what? Bot is the chief investigative officer of the cult. Bot researches all of these people. She is the most valuable asset. Well, one of the most valuable assets that we have. I don't want to say you're the most valuable, Bot, because, Sin is right up there too. There are a couple other really valuable assets that we have in my community, but Bot is extremely valuable because she gets the dirt on all these people. She is giving an abolish the family and police speech in Chicago today. Are you on her Twitter or something? Bot, have you been tweeting at her? We really should connect with Sophie at some point. Sophie, by the way, Sophie is already an announced speaker at the socialist conference that I want to go to in a couple of months. She's going to be there. I'm going to get to go see Abolish the Family live and in person. And so if you want to support my dream of going to this socialist conference in person, please make sure you sign up as a paid subscriber for $5 a month, $50 a year on my Substack, carlin.substack.com, and I will tell you guys everything. I will share everything these people say. I have a whole plan that I'm putting into place. I have people I'm working with to be able to protect my safety and that sort of thing, but I really want to go, and I can't go without your help. So please sign up as a paid supporter on my Substack, $5 a month, $50 a year. You will fund my ability to go to the socialist conference in a couple months where Sophie's going to be there in person. It'll be amazing. And if you don't want to sign up on my Substack, that's cool, man. Go to activelyunwoke.com/support. You will get links to my locals community, which you can join, kb.locals.com. You will get links to my Patreon. You'll be able to make a one-time gift, whatever way works best for you. And I do appreciate all forms of support. I'm just really trying to get my Substack numbers up because I want that nice orange check. I already have a check mark. I'm already verified on Substack, but I want the next level verification, which you can only get with paid subscribers. And so if you want to support me on there, I do really appreciate it. Philanthropist says, I'm going to sign up. I got to hear this. It's going to be in a couple months. Don't get too excited. We got some time, but I need to do a lot of planning and I need to do a lot of preparation. And yes, I will probably bring holy water. I'm not Christian, as you know, but I probably will bring holy water and sage and all forms of clearing energy and all of that stuff. Anyway, guys, let's get back to the show. And please make sure you mount that like button if you haven't already. There's still there's a gap between the number of people watching and the number of people who have mounted that like button for me. And so when you mount the like button, you let people know that this is a stream that you want to watch and think other people should be watching too, and it allows YouTube to serve my stream to more people, which I really do appreciate. Also, please make sure you are subscribed to the channel if you have not subscribed yet. Of course, orange checks are bourgeois, and we want to be bourgeois, don't we? Absolutely. All right, let's keep going, guys.
And so in that sense, there's something quite different going on when people say that what they're building is family, when in fact they're not benefiting in the legal sense from that status.
So there was an interesting case which I'm gonna try. So there's two cases. If I remember correctly, they were in like either, I think they were 94 or 95. I'm sure someone's gonna listen to this and correct me because I'm sure that's probably wrong. But so when you learn criminal law, one of the first cases that you learn is this case called the Crown and Brown, because it is fucking juicy. So it's basically these guys came together and their whole thing was sort of like knocking their dicks to bits of wood, like with nails. And that was their thing, and like crack on. And they were filming it, and someone got hold of this video, and then they got prosecuted for GBH. And it was a case where you're talking about whether or not you're allowed to consent to a certain level of harm. And they were all like, no, we really loved it, Your Honor. Like, this was our thing. And he was like, no. And so he sent a load of them down for grievous bodily harm. Now, the year after, there was a case called the Crown and Wilson, if I'm remembering this correctly, where this woman was in a swimming changing room, and her friend noticed these cuts on her butt, and she was like, "What's that?" And it's like, "Oh yeah, Mr. Wilson just like carved his initials into my ass as like a sex thing." And the friend, you imagine this conversation like a swimming pool, changing room, being like, "Cool, cool, 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 cool." Sally, it's 2 p.m. on a Tuesday, love. And then obviously this went to court on the same principle, and the judge in that said, "Well, it's not for the courts to say what should go on
Because Mr. Wilson did it.
because it's behind the closed doors of a family thing." And I think that really like illustrates the way in which this kind of, what you're talking about here, the way in which the family and the notion of like what the state, the way that the state allows violence to occur or is complicit in violence within that because of the sanctity of this family.
Yeah.
And I guess that's where some of the difficulty comes with like pulling this sort of amorphous web of the word family apart between these like queer families of lads knocking their dicks onto bits of wood. I mean, run free, not for me, if I'm honest. But
Oh yeah.
yeah, cool, whatever. And this going on in a family home. And in order to pull those apart, in order to start looking at it, it requires, I think you were talking about it a little while ago, imagination, right? And for me, abolition and the difficulty we all have as abolitionists has always been this invitation to imagine. And you kind of talk about it a bit at the end, and sort of like not like giving a prescriptive, not doing a Charlie for you. Nailed it. And being prescriptive on it, and then inviting people to imagine. I just wonder if you could kind of talk a little bit about how difficult that is within the society that we live in.
Yeah. Well, actually, the people who come to mind when you ask me about this problem are Michelle Barrett and Mary McIntosh, these two British Marxist feminists who were living under Thatcher and keeping the little torch of abolishing the family visions alive. Like, I've got a torch about the size of a matchstick. I think that's the size of their torch in the 80s, the grim darkness of the 80s, where I do think in a weird way the left could maybe do with thinking a bit more. There are ways in which the 60s are talked about too much, and there are ways in which I think there's still not enough grieving that has been done of the defeat, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I've kind of been thinking about grief and how we think about the experience of being repeatedly defeated, and the psychological gymnastics we do. I guess going back to that thing of sort of failure happened, so it was silly to try. And it's a very natural cope almost inevitable in a certain way, like maybe, or melancholic, right? We talk a lot about left melancholia, but
Oh yeah.
but I wonder if that's partly because of an ungrieved
Kurt,
character.
I don't know if we can be friends
the
anymore,
the
Kurt.
left had a moment of huge possibility in the long 60s, and then it got stomped into the dust. And one of the things in this context that matters to me is the fact that the most conservative, reactionary strands of women's liberation were the ones left standing in the rubble. And they wrote the history of what women's liberation was, and everybody hated them at the time. This is Alice Eccles's point in her history of women's liberation, daring to be bad, and I just need to hammer it home in every context, because those people are the trans exclusionary radical feminist brand that has taken over this island that I don't live on and didn't grow up in, and have a sort of maybe like a slightly outside perspective on, despite sounding like I'm from here. There's this.
These people really hate the TERFs. This was true at the Socialist Conference too. So I'm going to release a clip from Happy Hour from yesterday. So if you didn't attend Happy Hour yesterday, there was a clip in which we were listening to this pro-abortion like socialist journalist named Amy Littlefield, in which she was inextricably trying to link trans and abortion because they're framing it as like a bodily autonomy issue. But really what it is again, it goes back to the four goals of the woke left are to gain as much power as possible, destabilize the system, attack capitalism, usher in a Marxist utopia. They don't really care about trans. They also really don't care about abortion. They want to do everything they can that is going to destabilize the system. And so in order to do that, they're trying to inextricably link trans in terms of a bodily autonomy and abortion in terms of a bodily autonomy. And this was not just in the presentation we heard yesterday, which I'll be releasing a clip of either tonight or tomorrow. I also heard it all day at the Socialist Conference. And remember, the Socialist Conference I went to last week was explicitly a reproductive justice conference. So hang on, I'm going to sneeze. Sorry about that. So the Socialist Conference I went to last week was a reproductive justice conference. So it was all supposed to be about abortion. But I swear to God, half of the time they were talking about trans. And even in the main keynotes, they were spending more time on trans than they were on actual abortion. And it's because they're trying to link these two issues. And they hate the TERFs. They hate the TERFs. They kept bringing the TERFs up, like the trans exclusionary radical feminists over and over again at the Socialist Conference. We heard it yesterday in Happy Hour. And now Sophie has just brought up the TERFs again.
Kind of way in which
hang on, I got a super chat coming in. Sorry, I didn't see it before I started the thing. Listen to the last 24 seconds, first time listener. I quite liked your take. Well, I hope you stick around a little bit more than 24 seconds, but I do appreciate the super chat and welcome. If this is your first Socialism Saturday, try not to feel too overwhelmed. It gets a little bit easier after a couple of weeks. Well, yeah, this is why they hate the TERFs, because the TERFs are against children being brainwashed. That's one of many reasons why they hate the TERFs.
Calls them, who were quite anti-utopian at the time, unlike many of their sisters. And they, as I say, sort of won. And so they got to say, yeah, women's lib never was about abolishing the family. This is a lie. They got to say, women's lib was never about, fighting alongside trans women. This is a lie, right? Trans women were there in the long 60s. Anyway, bit of a sidebar, but what I'm trying to get at is, like, there is something about anti-utopianism that is structural and that we need to keep pointing to in order to start to be able to fight it. And in the 80s, to go back to Michelle Barrett and Mary McIntosh and their tiny little torch.
The tiny torch. I'll hold it with you.
So everything has been lost. Nobody is dreaming big anymore on the left. Another sidebar, really quick. Ellen Willis has an essay at the end of the 70s where she says in the Village Voice, What happened, comrades? 10 years ago, you were saying abolish the family. You were, I have the receipts. And now you're saying we never meant that. We never
Yes,
said that.
that is what Sophie is
You know,
saying.
why?
Exactly.
Do you have
We were not
receipts?
wrong to
Did she
try.
print the receipts? I
Does she really believe utopia can be achieved? All right, I gotta say it again, but we're gonna give Slongy and Stu a break because they just got here, so they haven't heard me say it already 4 times. But this will be a review for everyone else. The 4 goals of the woke left in every single thing that they're doing, to include the socialists, but also to include the teachers who are teaching our kids every day, are gain as much power as possible, destabilize the system, attack capitalism, usher in a Marxist utopia. That is their goal. I use the word utopia in that list for a reason. They really do believe that if we just get rid of capitalism, we will be able to create some sort of utopian society where you will own nothing and you will be happy. They do believe that exists. And they are trying to put things in place to create the mechanisms of that society. It's not just a pipe dream for them. So if you've heard about these 15-minute cities, if you haven't heard about a 15-minute city, go ahead and Google 15-minute city. That's part of you will own nothing and you will be happy. That's what their utopia looks like. Their utopia also looks like us not having private kitchens and eating bugs and not having biological families and things like that. So yes, they absolutely do believe that a utopia can be achieved. Now, I understand your perspective on that, but our goal with Socialism Saturday is to make sure we're understanding what these people believe and what they think. And so I'm just explaining what they believe. I'm not saying I buy into it. I'm not saying I agree with it. I'm just saying that this is what they believe. The philosophist. How upfront are they at the conferences regarding destabilization and subversion? They don't say it like that. They don't, I mean, they don't say it like that. I say it's about destabilization because every single thing that they support is designed fundamentally to destabilize the pillars of society. Every single thing that they do is designed to destabilize it. And so they might not say it outright, but like think about it. Every single time there is a tragedy or something is going on, these people pop right up to take advantage of it so that they can blame capitalism for all of the problems of society. So they don't say it outright, but you can tell that by their actions. And yeah, exactly. We watched Yuri Brezhnev a couple weeks ago on Socialism Saturday. Yuri Brezhnev does the same thing. They have to create problems because if they don't create problems, they can only achieve their Marxist revolution if people are experiencing pain. Because if people's lives are generally pretty good and they're like, capitalism is pretty great, I'm doing pretty great, I've got money, my family's happy, all this stuff, like no one is going to desire a Marxist revolution if things are going well and people aren't experiencing pain. So they have to create that pain in order to rile people up enough so that they can come in and say, what's really to blame for all of this? Capitalism. And if we didn't have capitalism, then your life would be substantially better. And then they say, "Oh yeah, you think my life would be better? What do you have to offer?" And they're going to say socialism. And that's how they're going to facilitate their little Marxist takeover. Does that make sense? Do I think they will win? Yeah. And this might not be what people want to hear, but these people are winning. They're winning. They win every single day. They are years ahead of us. If people don't start, that's part of why we do Socialism Saturday. If people don't start understanding this and start recognizing it and start fighting back, these people are going to win and it's not even going to be close. They are already years, possibly decades ahead of us. And that's not a joke. As much as I do joke on this channel, that is actually very, very real. So yeah, if people don't start speaking up and doing something and fighting back, which is part of what my channel is all about, they're going to win.
I live for that drama. I live for it so
Yeah.
much. See, it's so easy to do now because everyone tweets shit.
Yeah,
But back then,
that's true. It was hard.
tricky.
Yeah, it was tricky. And she's sort of holding people a little bit to account and noticing. It's almost like this moment in time where
Exactly,
you can
John.
see the erasure and the forgetting being manufactured. Which is why today, actually, surprisingly few people have heard of this phrase "abolish the family," which was, I'm not going to pretend that it was like mainstream in 1969 or 1972, but it was something people had heard of, and it was relatively accepted in women's liberation as a really central part of feminism. And then people started pretending that it wasn't. And you have Gloria Steinem saying feminism has never been critical of the family. No.
Girl, what?
Yeah, exactly.
What are you
It's
up
like, you're
to?
just lying. You're just lying. Why are you lying?
This is humiliating for you.
Let's think about why we're lying.
Mm.
There are reasons. Anyway, but Michelle Barrett and Mary McIntosh refused to collude in that lie. And so while that
Hang on, I want to take this question from the Philosophist. Do you think there's still hope to stop this? Yes. Or at least build parallel systems? Parallel systems are not going to work. Everything that the Daily Wire is doing is not going to work. The Daily Wire is doing what they're doing just to make money. I hope people understand that. It's not going to work. You cannot build parallel systems and compete with these people because they own government and they own all the major institutions. And so they're just going to squash any parallel systems that you try to build. It's not going to work. Is there time to stop this? Yes, but not that much. And if people don't, but it entirely depends on what people are actually willing to do. I right now am very black-pilled on the possibility of us like being able to stop this, because I do not believe that most people are willing to do what is required to stop it. Because that's going to include taking your kids out of school and homeschooling them. The most important thing that could happen to stop this is if every single parent, or not even maybe the vast majority, if like if 30% of parents, like 1/3 of parents, removed their children from public school right now and homeschooled them, that would be a step towards turning this back. But if parents are unwilling to remove their kids from public school, and they make every excuse and they whine and complain and they say, I don't want to do it. We have jobs. That's their big excuse about why they can't do stuff. We have jobs. We can't do anything. We have jobs. Why are you asking us to do things? We have jobs. I'm sorry to yell into the microphone, but that is the excuse that I hear like quite literally every effing day. If people are unwilling to stop making excuses and start doing what's necessary, which is pulling your children out of the public school system, which is stop supporting companies that hate you, which is stop voting for politicians like the Republicans that are never going to do anything, then we are not going to win. And people make every excuse in the book for why they won't do these things. Who are we going to vote for? Democrats? Well, your Republican politicians aren't doing anything. Your Republican politicians are basically 2 years behind the Democrats. Republicans support critical race theory in schools now. Did you guys know this? That's true. They're a couple years behind it, and people are still voting for them because they're like, they're better than Democrats. Well, no, they're not, because they're supporting exactly the same policies. And so can we turn it back? Yeah. But only if people are willing to actually do what's required to turn it back. For my part, I'm downloading every single thing that I know to you guys, and I'm trying to teach you as best I can. And I hope that people will share the information that I'm giving you. And I hope you'll teach other people in your life about what's going on, because there are still so many people who don't understand what's going on. If you're every single person watching this right now, you guys are quite literally years ahead of the normal population in terms of understanding what's going on. Most people don't understand it like you. And so if you want to win and you want to beat back this cultural revolution, we need to be sharing this information out as much as possible. We need to be doing everything that we can to undercut these people when they try to take over institutions. We need to be taking our kids out of public schools. Like, we need to stop voting for horrible politicians that will do nothing to support what needs to be done, that just talk a good game and then don't back it up. And all of these things are hard. And most importantly, we need to stop making excuses about why we can't do things. We need to stop infighting and destroying people on our own team. And we need to keep in mind who the real enemy is, which are these people. And if we aren't focusing on the things that matter most and we're just destroying each other all the time because people want clout and media and status and all of the things that go on the right all the effing time, then we are going to lose, and it will, quite frankly, be our own fault. Anyway, let's get back to the show, guys. We've got about 20 minutes left.
Thatcher was saying, there is no such thing as society. There are individual men and women, and there are families. They are saying, yep. And the reason for that is the family. Like, the reason why there is no society is the family. It's this really elegant point. The book is called The Antisocial Family. And so they're kind
Then
of
they're going to lose.
And
they're going to lose their kids.
Assumption on its head,
and it'll be their own fault.
What if
figure it out?
The family is almost
stop making excuses.
Our sociality from us, and because of our assumption that I think they have a phrase like, I'm gonna get it wrong, but it's like love. Like,
listen, guys, and I promise this will be the last thing I say about this. If you are using the schools to babysit your kids, and that is the only reason that you are sending your kids to public schools is because they are free babysitters for your kids, then you are going to lose your children. They are going to be indoctrinated into this ideology, and it will be your fault when they come home and decide that they're trans because you used the school to babysit your kids when there are probably other solutions available that are much healthier. It'll be your own damn fault. I don't want to hear any excuses about why people can't do stuff. I really don't. There are where there is a will, there is a way. And I know parents. For people who don't, I know parents who had their kids transed by the schools. I know parents who they sent their kid to school. They went to an after-school club that the school told them not to tell their parents about, and then they came home believing they were trans as a result of one meeting of the after-school club, and then that took months of deprogramming and therapy. I promise you, the inconvenience of pulling your kids out of public school is going to pale in comparison to the inconvenience of having to completely deprogram your children from gender ideology, which will take months, if not years, of intensive work to undo the damage that the schools can do in quite literally an afternoon. So don't complain when it happens. Because there have been people like me that have been screaming, quite literally, for 3.5 years, I've been screaming this on the internet almost every single day. And then people are, I didn't think it would happen to my kids. I just don't, no one ever told me. No, you were told repeatedly, you were told in no uncertain terms. And then you said, I have a job. I can't do it. I have a job. I can't do it. And then you're surprised when you have to put your kid in therapy for 2 intensive years and to take your kids out of the public schools anyway, which you damn well should have done before. And you're surprised when it all happens. Well, guess what? We told you it was going to happen. There's stuff all over conservative news every single day. We told you it was going to happen. We told you exactly how they do it. I lay out all of the policies for you that allow the schools to do it. We have shown you case study after 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 case study of schools doing it. It is in every public school. It is not just in the blue states. It is not just in the blue cities. It is in every red state. It is in every red city. They are in the conservative schools as well, the ones you think are conservatives but really aren't, because they're run by the teachers and the teaching pool population is completely corrupted. And then I told you all of this for years, several times, and you said, but I have a job. I have a job. I can't do it. I have a job. Well, guess what? When your kid comes home and decides they're trans, and then your kid gets taken away because you don't want to put them on the trans medication, but the state has already passed laws saying that they can terminate your parental rights if you don't put your kids on the puberty blockers and then on the cross-sex hormones when they're 15 years old, and then get them trans-affirming surgery so you're cutting off their boobs before they're even old enough to drive a car. Your job's going to seem a lot less important at that point. And I won't feel sorry for you at all. To be quite frank, you want to know why? Because I turned my life upside down, gave up everything I had worked for years to build to tell you every single day for 3.5 years what is going on, and you didn't listen, and you whined and complained and made excuses about why you couldn't do what was necessary to protect your kids. I don't mean to sound heartless, but all the information is out there. There have been some of us that spend our entire lives beating this drum, and what we get met with is, we have jobs! We have jobs! Don't you know we have jobs? We're the only people with jobs! The left doesn't have jobs! We have jobs! That's why we can't do anything! We have jobs! Every single fucking day. Every day. The left doesn't make excuses like the right makes excuses, and that is why they win.
Mother love and good things to eat is to be found in this one place. That's keeping us from meeting each other in the public sphere.
Mm-hmm.
And so people always asked them, they said, what would you put in place of the family? And they have this response, which I find very striking, which is, we would put nothing in the place of the family. Like, the answer is nothing, because we will find out what the social is when we stop running indoors to get our needs met in this private realm that is starved on purpose by capitalism, because it's ultimately functioning to give free labor to capitalism. And so you can't do one without the other. You can't overthrow capitalism, I think, without changing the family. And you also definitely can't change the family without overthrowing capitalism. That's the bad news. This book probably should say, you know,
come with a warning.
Deprivatize the private nuclear household. Doesn't have a good ring to it, or like positively supersede the private nuclear
It's not
household.
quite as sexy.
Or like, you know, overthrow capitalism, which has sort of been done a little bit. The bad news is, yeah, you can't. I do not want to separate out what a family abolitionist politics would look like from the struggle against capitalism, basically. And I think if you did try to abolish the family without abolishing capitalism, you would create a nightmare worse than what we have.
So
I just want to be
miserable.
really clear about that. Like, it's worse. You would create a nightmare.
What she's saying here is that abolishing the family is entirely about abolishing capitalism. So for the person who asked earlier, when I say the 4 goals of the woke left are to gain as much power as possible, destabilize the system, attack capitalism, usher in their Marxist utopia. Someone asked me earlier, do they flat out say that their goal is to destabilize the system at these conferences? And the answer is no. They don't flat out say it in those terms, but I want you to hear that what she just said was that you cannot abolish capitalism without abolishing the family. Abolishing the family leads to the destabilization required to abolish capitalism. That's what I mean when I say destabilize the system, because every policy that these people implement, every idea that these people insert into the public sphere is designed to destabilize the system. It's designed to keep people fighting. It's designed to destabilize the markets. It's designed to destabilize the dollar, cause inflation, as we're all experiencing now, causing gas prices to go up, causing people to lose their homes, not have enough money to live on because we've tanked the value of the dollar, because we've given out free money and all this stuff for years and years and years. And God knows that has consequences. All of that is designed to destabilize the system. Abolishing the family is going to destabilize the system because it's going to destabilize one of the key pillars of society, of Western society, of all society for that matter. And so she's flat out telling you that you can't get to the abolish capitalism phase until you abolish the family. That's how they say they're destabilizing the system, because everything, 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 everything is in service to getting to a place where they can attack capitalism, because they want to be able to blame every bad thing in society on capitalism. And yes, they're going to come after homeschooling. They already are coming after homeschooling. They've been coming after homeschooling for years because they don't want people to be able to escape the system.
To bring us to a heady conclusion, because we've traveled a lot of ground, I kind of, as an end to it, the difficulty with abolition has always been this, how big it is, right? It's mammoth. And as you were saying, trying to sort of like pull the idea of abolishing the family without abolishing capitalism is nonsensical, and it would create this dystopia.
She said both.
And we kind of talked a little bit about the way in which, to a certain extent, families can operate as an incubator of kind of revolutionary practice and theory towards the destruction of capitalism. So kind of as a final point, I wondered if you could kind of talk through, like, what is it that we as abolitionists, as socialists, communist, Marxists, lads, non-gendered lads, should be doing right now in the intermediary.
Remember, they want to
we
get
kind
rid
of
of
to
gender
the
too.
swinging barricades and do you hear the people sing? How do we abolish the family now without abolishing the family?
I want to figure this out with people. I don't have a set of directives, but off the top of my head, my instincts are sort of that. Well, I'm interested in children's liberation. There is a really terrible situation right now, I think, around the figure of the innocent, desexualized, fertile child who the fascists are obsessed with. Right, the cisgender child as a figure of sort of fascist incursion. It is terrifying me right now, in the sense that the left hasn't got a robust response. Like, is afraid, I think, to say, children are people with bodily autonomy and sexualities, even, and the right to be part of the world and to determine, perhaps, not just their healthcare needs, but also maybe who and how who they live with and how they live. Like
Mhm.
this was a horizon that was
They're
part of this
coming for
moment
your
that I'm
children,
suggesting
folks.
has been
And they're telling
purposefully
you out
erased and
loud.
forgotten. And I think it's especially important right now with an assault on transgender children.
There it is.
So I think in a weird way, I almost want to say,
There it is. We're going to rewind this and watch it again. But what I want you to hear when she's talking about, I'm really interested in children's liberation and I just want to protect children and it's all about the children and they have this weird fascination with the children. And really, it's all about protecting the children, especially the trans children. The trans children are the most important, but I just really want to protect the children. The reason they are pushing gender ideology into the schools and trying to trans all the kids is because they want to destabilize the system and speed up this idea of making progress essentially towards abolishing the family. So listen, I've said over and over again, I think that Jeffrey Marsh actually has a point when it comes to families of choice. I do. However, do you think it's any coincidence that Jeffrey Marsh is out there preaching to children about families of choice? Because they're using these types of things to plant ideas in the heads of your kids that will indirectly abolish the family. This is why it's really important for you guys, for those of you who have kids. I don't have kids for a reason. Those of you who do have kids, your number one job has got to be having a real and authentic relationship with your children. Not something where you're ordering them around, not something where you are like, you are the boss and they are to obey whatever you say. That's not going to work. You need to talk to your kids, get to know your kids, have real conversations with your kids, build trusting relationships with your kids. You need to spend the time that's required to do it, and keeping in mind that your kids, if they are in public school, are spending way more time with their teachers in public school than they are spending with you. And that's how they're getting your kids, is through public school. And the very best thing that you can do to fight that from happening is to build authentic, genuine, trustworthy relationships with your children so that they are telling you things and they don't keep secrets from you and they feel comfortable with you. A lot of people aren't doing that. They think they are, but they are not doing that. And those are the kids that are getting sucked into trans ideology in schools. And the reason they are pushing trans ideology and making this big deal about protecting trans kids, they don't care about trans kids. They don't care about it at all. But it is a really easy way to kind of zing in there and indirectly abolish the family, because you've got people like Jeffrey Marsh convincing these kids to go after a family of choice. You've got people like, this woman who's like pushing this ideology onto kids and saying like, straight cisgender kids are like fascist or whatever. We're going to rewind and listen to it again. Yup. People on the autism spectrum are especially susceptible to this. So that's really important to know. Let's rewind this section and just listen to it again, because I do think that this is a really important point. Okay.
I don't have a set of directives, but off the top of my head, my instincts are sort of that well, I'm interested in children's liberation. There is a really terrible situation right now, I think, around the figure of the innocent, desexualized, fertile child who the fascists are obsessed with, right? The cisgender child as a figure of sort of fascist incursion is terrifying me right now, in the sense that the left hasn't got a robust response, like is afraid, I think, to say, you know, children are people with bodily autonomy and sexualities even, and the right to be part of the world and to determine perhaps not just, their healthcare needs, but also maybe who and how, who they live with and how they live. Like this was a horizon that was part of this moment that I'm suggesting has been purposively erased and forgotten. And I think it's especially important right now with an assault on transgender children. So I think in a weird way, I almost want to say, let's get courageous and talk to children.
They are fucking terrifying. To be fair,
no, but like,
have you met an 8-year-old? They're nuts.
Yeah, this is the challenge we must face. And
they do slap though. They're great.
Yeah, and there is a sort of segregation of them, isn't it? And a real prohibition on people in general just talking. The stranger danger thing has been internalized so much that I don't even think people are really critical of it anymore. Like when I dropped my my cousin at school at one point, and I was like, this is a military airlock. Like I have to be some kind of signed off safe adult in order to be the person dropping him off. This is mad. Like, that there's a real securitization of childhood, I think, that needs to be contested. And that's one sort of front that I'm thinking of. And I'm also then thinking about
that is remember, Sophie's perspective is that kids should belong to everyone, that kids shouldn't be afraid of, like, people who are strangers, that everyone just has the best interest of kids at heart. And I'm going to tell you this, they're trying to normalize adult and child relationships. Do you guys understand what I'm saying? They're trying to, well, kids just have their own sexuality, and maybe kids should be making why aren't we allowing kids to make decisions about who they want to live with and who they want to spend time with? Because kids have their own thoughts and their own sexualities. She actually said that earlier. Did you guys catch that? Kids have their own sexualities. So why aren't we allowing kids to make decisions about who they want to live with? I'm sorry, what? But she believes that kids should not be property of their parents because she wants to abolish all private property. So all kids should belong to everyone else, and I don't know why we're putting these precautions in place. Are you guys seeing how all of this is connected to what's going on in the schools? Are you guys seeing how what's going on in the schools with the gender and sexuality alliances, or the GSAs, is leading to abolish the family? Is this clear to people? I'm really asking. This is why you need to get your kids out of public school. I don't know how I can make this any more clear. I really don't.
Ways that we might expand mutual aid infrastructures, stuff like, feeding each other, providing spaces for people to get warm or cool, depending, spaces to be. It's all very bread and butter, anti-capitalist things in the end, because, as I say, it's about building the sorry, waving my hands around. It's not primarily about changing the way that your intimate relationships work. It's about building the world that puts that takes the coercion out, the dependence out, so that we can become richer in needs. I love this phrase. There's this way that the welfare radicals of the US, who are a lot of often, Black women with children whom the state was truly demonizing and pathologizing, and some of them campaigned for welfare on the basis that they were, virtuous moms making a contribution to society or potential workers or whatever. And some of them didn't. They were like, actually there's no freedom to be had in these justifications of human worth, in the frame of motherhood and in the frame of worker. Just give us money. There's something very radical about that, about refusing to justify why. My children, and so on and so forth. You might strategically do that at certain points, but I think just to answer your question, like, I think the lads, the non-gendered lads, of the left, needs to,
that's
I
great,
think,
Jennifer.
get a little bit
Important
braver,
update. Thank you.
also at challenging the rhetoric of motherhood.
Jesus Christ.
Because, of course, a lot of the people who do mothering, I call them motherers, to just ram home the point that we can mother one another after the abolition of the family. In fact, this is what will hopefully be lifted up, made red, like,
I mean, most
a red
people that
love.
meet me mother me, to be honest.
Yeah.
They just get the sense I can't look after myself and push me in the direction of food and water.
It's a non-gendered mothering, isn't it, that we need? And there's a beautiful philosophical tradition of thinking about how those who were never meant to survive must learn to mother themselves or ourselves. And so this is the red love skillfulness that will become
love.
Developed necessarily in conditions where mothers are not just like one person in everyone's life in a private nuclear household. So the rhetoric of a certain kind of feminism is very uncritical of what I would call...
Hang on, I got a super chat from Naruto, thank you. Just curious, after the Nick Fuentes stream, did the Groypers that made it to the end stay subscribed? I don't think so, because they ended up like saying a lot of Hitler stuff at the end, and I just blocked them because I'm not dealing with that. But they were really nice for most of the stream. You got to give them credit. They held it together. Anyway, guys, we have about 8 minutes left. This is your last chance to mount that like button. This is your last chance to subscribe to the channel if you have not already. Remember that we do Socialism Saturday every Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. And if you would like to attend movie night in my supporter Discord tomorrow and get all sorts of other exclusive perks, make sure you are subscribing as a paid subscriber to my Substack at Carlyn, KARLYN.substack.com. And thank you guys for joining me this week. It's been a banner Socialism Saturday.
Patriarchal motherhood. Motherhood is an institution that, Adrienne Rich, for example, suggested needed to be abolished by, paradoxically, mothering. You do mothering against motherhood because motherhood is exclusionary and privatizing. And it's about an identity. And, TERFs love talking about the sanctity and the innocence of motherhood. In fact, one TERF has reviewed this book with a title, Don't Come for Mothers.
Are you coming for mothers?
And to bring it right back to the top of the show, Ben, as I said, I am coming for your
Pretty sure so. Thank you, Toxic Male Gamer. I appreciate it.
She's yours. My gift to you.
No, but, the reason why I'm not coming for your grandmother in that sense isn't because she's a mother, right? It's because she's a comrade. Maybe.
Yeah. I guess maybe it's about making grandmothers of us all.
Yeah.
Mothers of us all.
Grandmothers of us all.
Rather than simply relying on the unpaid labor.
Everyone belongs to everyone else.
Ruthlessly critique.
We're all comrades.
I do.
We're all grandmothers now.
That's why we've not spoken for 16 years.
Yeah, well, I'm very sorry about that, because it's and congratulations.
Thank you.
And congratulations. And one thing that we haven't necessarily said outright, but which again used to be a lot more of a prevalent point, is that whereas the family in a lot of like mainstream narratives and policy discussions is still the safe place that you're supposed to go to, for example, escape from the the sexual harassers on the street. There's still, I think, in popular consciousness, this idea that assault or various forms of often sexualized violence happen maybe like in public, and then the home is a refuge from it. This is the opposite of reality, isn't it? And people used to say that a lot. Feminism used to constantly say, the home is not safe, right? The majority of the rape that happens on this earth, and the murder, and the sexual assault, and all kinds of, and child sexual abuse happens within the family. It happens within the family. And that alone is almost like a humanitarian crisis that in a certain way you could say, wow, we should really do something about this. The family is a way of allowing that violence to be carried out with a certain kind of impunity. And you cited a legal case that basically confirms that certain forms of violence are a-okay, consensual within the family. But it was only about 5 minutes ago that most states outlawed marital rape, or acknowledged that marital
92 in this country,
right?
Which, I mean, I was alive, which is like nuts to me because I'm so young.
Yeah, absolutely.
But a fetus.
Absolutely.
Oh,
If you enjoyed that chat, or even if you didn't and you want to learn more, in this new segment, we're going to talk you through some recommended reading.
well, we don't need to hear your recommended reading, Ben, but thank you for that. Well, guys, I guess that is the end of our Abolish the Family Socialism Saturday. Did I blow anyone's mind? How is everyone feeling? If this was your first Socialism Saturday, let us know how this little jaunt into the far left insanity went for you. Again, we do this every Saturday at 6 p.m. I hope you'll consider joining us in the future, because it is important to know what your enemy is saying and really understand them. That's why we listen to the whole thing. We listen to the boring bits, we listen to the cringy bits, we listen to the whole thing in all of its glory, so that we can really understand what is going on. That video was about 6 months old. It's not that long ago, guys. 6 months old. And this woman has been giving talks around the Ivy League for years. She's written 2 books. This is not an abstract concept. This is real life. And I keep saying to you guys that I will show you the dark dystopian underbelly of both sides. And this is the dark dystopian underbelly for sure. But guys, if you appreciated it, I hope you will consider joining me in the future. And of course, please make sure you are subscribed to my Substack. One last call for this, which is carlin.substack.com. Now, for those of you who are subscribed, tomorrow you will be receiving an email that looks like this. It is called the Unwoke Roundup. This is a newsletter that I do every single week on Sundays, where I lay out all of the content that I've created for you this week, so you can see when you support my work financially, either through a paid subscription on Substack, or a subscription to my locals, or a subscription to my Patreon, or you make a one-time gift, or you become a channel member, whatever way you want to do it, I show you every single week exactly what I'm working on, so you can see exactly what you are funding. That is what the Unwoke Roundup newsletter is. If you are a paid supporter of my work, this is where you get your supporter perks. So, when you sign up as a paid supporter on Substack, you get access to 2 Zoom calls every single week on Mondays and Wednesdays. You get access to the supporter Discord, where we will have movie night tomorrow at 8 p.m. We are watching The Wolf of Wall Street tomorrow at 8 p.m., so you can come and join us for that. And this is where you're also going to get all of your news and the content that you may have missed this week, because I make a lot of content. FYI, I make an metric F ton of content. And so I put it all in one place so you can catch up. Now, if you appreciate the work I'm doing, please support it. Like I said, I have a certain goal for subscribers that I'm trying to hit in Substack, because I currently have this check mark in Substack, which means I have hundreds of paid supporters on Substack, which I really do appreciate. But you know what happens when I get over 1,000 paid supporters in Substack? I get a different check mark. And I'm like a vain little bitch at some points, and I want that solid orange check mark. And so you guys can help me get one step closer to that, which of course I really do appreciate. You'll get access to your supporter perks. If you don't want to support me on Substack, that's cool, man. No harm, no foul. But please do it on some other platform, whether that be Locals or Patreon or on this here YouTube channel by sending a super chat like Jay Hundo, for using your mastermind strats on my project manager to work less for more money. I appreciate that, Jay Hundo. But guys, and if you can't afford to support my work, I totally get it. There are some, there like people are it's tough times for a lot of people, and I understand that. But please make sure you are sharing it. If you value my work and you just don't have the extra cash right now, I can understand that. But please make sure you are sharing my work out with people so that I can build my audience, so that I can get more people to support me on Substack, so I can get that bougie orange check mark. All right, guys. Thank you again. I will look forward to seeing everyone for movie night tomorrow in the supporter Discord. I do take Sundays off from streaming because, I need a weekend too. But I will be back streaming on Monday at 5 p.m. I've already got some stuff picked out. We're gonna do some. I've already got some good articles for Monday about the Twitter meltdown with all the blue checks. It was glorious. All right, guys, that's all for tonight. Take care. Have a good weekend, and we'll see you soon.